that's a hard thing to do. We have talked about different ways of doing this and putting it around the table. There's so many applicants tonight. I don't think that we're going to be able to do that effectively. So if you wouldn't mind, because it's televised, I'll call you in the order, I guess, that people showed up, and that if you wouldn't mind just speaking at the mic, because there's people that are watching on television, probably a grand total of 2, but there are some people. So with that, we might as well start with Sarah. And I think that you're interested in a ProStack position, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself? Obviously, we have the information that you sent to us, but how long you've been here, your interest in this, and why ProStack would be a good fit for you.
Sure. My name's Sarah Londorf. I am actually a native. Been living in Louisville until last year, and I'm now a homeowner in Superior. I'm a loan officer at Elevations Credit Union, so I know a lot about budgets and numbers and things like that related to ProStack. Other than that, I'm a frequent user of the trails and would love to get involved in local government.
Great. So I think that instead of me just speaking here, we'll just run down the line to see if people have particular questions, if that's all right. So I don't know, Sandy, if you want to start out, or
I had one question right off. In looking at your application, the application you filled out, you said you're a volunteer for Intercambia.
Yes.
Intercambio or Intercambia? Is that? I'm not sure.
It's Intercambio.
Okay, what is that?
That is where you teach non-English speakers English. It's a nonprofit in Boulder.
Okay.
So you help out. I help out once a week teaching non-English speakers English at the library. So.
Great. Chris, did you? Anyway, Sandy, you have questions?
What are you getting your master's in?
I'm actually doing a web page design.
Graphic design, that kind of thing?
Yep. It's more designing online courses, so kind of the education side of it too.
Okay. And your thoughts on what you see in terms of our parks and trail, either plan or observations based on your use, what's happening to parks and trails in this area? Any pros or cons or yays or nays or observations?
Well, I did read the master plan, and I thought it was really interesting that one of the goals is to have a park every, I think it was a third of a mile from someone's house or business. So I think that's a really great goal. Obviously, the biggest thing facing ProStack now is the dog park, and I think we really need to look at that and maybe get that implemented in the near future.
Okay, great. Other questions?
What would be some of the ways you'd engage the community regarding the 3 parks, dog park and bike park?
I think it's hard because you have to find a balance between the community desires and the budget and the feasibility of the park. So maybe having focus groups or just really maybe even a survey, getting more input from the community itself.
Can we reserve the right after we hear everybody to come back?
Sure, I suspect if you wouldn't mind hanging around,
Sure.
That would be great. Okay. All right, so next on my list was Cynthia, and that was for RCAC. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Hi, I'm Cynthia Nielsen. I've been a resident of Superior for about 4 years now. I'm a civil engineer and architect by training, which back in the dark ages when I was going to college, there was no such thing really as environmental engineering, but that was really my interest. And so that's mostly what I've done since being out of college. Worked as a master planner for military communities overseas, U.S. military. And I think a lot of that experience could be useful for the committee. Also have worked for the last, 20-odd years, I guess, doing mostly environmental projects for various federal, state, and local agencies. working with the Army Corps of Engineers, and most recently here in Colorado for an environmental consulting firm that's mostly in the water business. So I have a lot of good ideas and a lot of interesting, diverse experience that I can bring to the committee, and hope that would be helpful.
Great, thanks.
Any
Questions?
specific questions?
Why are you applying for RCAC rather than Planning Commission?
I may eventually want to get involved with that. I have actually thought about that, but I feel like right now RCAC may need me more. I care a lot about conservation of our resources, and while I think the town is doing some wonderful things, there's always more we can do. And as my current role is mostly involving project management for environmental projects, I think that there's a lot I can offer to try to squeeze a few more projects, a few more initiatives out of our limited budget. So that's a particular interest for me. Conserving our own resources, too.
Very good. Other questions?
A quick question. If you could do one thing, if you could put some thought to it, to get the word out to the community more about energy conservation, how they could possibly transition their home to be more energy efficient, how would you do that, or what would you do?
I think we can make much better use of the newsletter that currently goes out, the excellent newsletter the town has, as well as the website. I know I've personally gone looking out on the town website, and I was looking more for water-related suggestions, tips on saving water, and there's some good resources out there, but I think we can get some more specific information out there for people on small things they can do, as well as the audit programs and so forth that we have available. Probably I still think most residents may not be aware of all of the opportunities that they have, and how easy some of these things are, that can save them money as well. So I think that we can make much better use of what we've already got.
Okay.
Would it be okay to ask you, so you said you were doing project management in water projects. What kind of water issues?
I work for MWH Global, and its main business is water supply and wastewater treatment. So, in fact, we were talking at our meeting, the RCAC meeting last week, about the possibility of encouraging our residents to use the garbage disposals to liquefy food waste and send it down the drain in lieu of putting it in the trash and having it end up in the landfill. And I was pointing out that there's issues you have to consider when you put it down the drain. It just creates a whole other set of problems.
That's
And
a
that'd still be a
double-edged
good
sword.
option for us, depending on what the load capacity is for our existing plant and where the waste ends up that comes out of the existing plant. Obviously, if it ends back up in the landfill, which I don't know, we have just cost ourselves even more to, get it down that path to the landfill. So, an example, I think, of how I might be able to help.
Yeah, great, thanks. Joe? Anybody?
This isn't a question, it's just a
Yeah.
note. We we did overlap for some time in Germany.
Really?
I don't know where
Where
you
were
lived. I was in Frankfurt, in the Frankfurt military community from
Okay.
83 to 86.
Yeah? Yeah, well,
Worked right down the road from the Corps office.
Probably passed in the store.
very well, more than likely we did, yes. It was an interesting time to be there.
Yeah, it was.
And I stayed through the fall of the wall. That was when I returned to the States. An interesting time to be in Germany.
So, given your pretty extensive international experience, is there anything that you've learned overseas that you can bring to our little town here that would be applicable to Superior?
I think everybody everywhere is experiencing the same exact challenges. I think we're fortunate to have more resources than some of the other organizations that I've worked with in the past to try to help. It may not feel like that to you all, but I spent a number of years working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Pacific Northwest, and that was a real challenging time to try to make tiny budgets go as far as possible, particularly trying to do some improvements to schools and other facilities for the Bureau there. So I have some idea that and some of my overseas experience with trying to do more with less, which I guess is the challenge all of us are facing these days.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's some good ideas. Simple is good.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. Appreciate it. Let's see. I can't read your writing, Scott.
That's a problem.
I'm guessing Joanne?
Yep. Okay. I could make that out.
Good afternoon. I'm Joanne Eaton. I've been a resident of Superior for 6.5 years. I spent 6 years, well, I guess all 6.5, working at Dillard's at Flatirons. I'm finally retired, and I've been looking for some volunteer things that I could use my skills. And I feel that the planning board is a good place for me because I've served on a planning board, planning commission, in Bozeman, Montana, right before I moved to Colorado 7 years ago. I spent almost 4 years on the planning board and the zoning commission in Bozeman. So it was at a time at the very beginning of their astronomical growth. It was a very interesting time. We did a comprehensive plan. I have read through yours. I feel that you're on the right track, and I would like to see and help this community proceed. I understand the responsibilities. I know that it can be time-consuming, but fortunately, I'm not working anymore. My background is in communications, public relations. I have a degree, and I think that I could be a good asset to this job.
Great. Thanks. Questions?
Observations from your review of the comprehensive plan, sort of commingled with the fact you've lived here, so you have experience in the community.
Yeah.
Has anything come to mind that struck you?
Not really. I wasn't looking at it with an eye to how I could improve it. I was more looking at it with an eye to what you all accomplished. And I think, as I said, I know what a task that can be. And I think you've done a wonderful job. I know that there's always room for amendment as time passes and things change. And we all have to be open to that. Yes?
I see you also worked on our town's events committee.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
What did you participate in?
I spent 3 years on the events committee, and I participated in, before it became a paid position for someone full-time, I guess, July 4th, the Chili Fest, just all the things that were done during that 3-year period. I worked with Melissa and with the other individuals on the committee, and she said I was certainly welcome to use her name as a reference with my skills and by dealing with people and things like that. I always attended them, and I still do when I'm here and I can. I went through a tough year physically. I had some things that went wrong that had to be fixed, fortunately. I think I got them all fixed now. So, and I also found another place that I decided to volunteer, which is the peer-to-peer counseling group through Boulder Mental Health. And it's giving me a good insight on dealing with people. And I've taken their training, and I would love to do this along with that.
Other questions? Well, I have to ask, since it's a planning commission appointment, are there any, doesn't appear by looking through this, there's any conflict of interest in terms of businesses or associations?
Not at all, no.
And can you just reflect back upon your time there in Bozeman and when you had a difficult decision to be made during the planning commission process? Is there anything that comes to mind, and can you describe that?
Well, I lived in Bozeman for 32 years. So when I first got there, we had 2 stoplights. And as I watched the community progress, I served on other committees. And when I was appointed to the planning board, I was pretty excited about it. And of course, with the different personalities, you're bound to have some conflict. I think one of the biggest things that we had a difficulty with was the design of some of the new subdivisions. I'm a firm believer in the new urbanite. I think that communities need to understand that we need to belong to the families and the people that are in the community, and the best ways to do that is to bring them all together. And so there was some disagreement with whether to approve a subdivision where the garages were going to be in the back of the houses instead of the front of the houses. Oh, how inconvenient. Well, too bad. I'm sorry. But I really do believe that the ideas that the architects and the engineers have come up with to improve our communities are very, very important. We ended up approving the subdivision that was in question. And I felt really fortunate to be a part of that commission because I think it has made a world of difference in the community itself. It's one of those things that really makes it stronger. I think it's kind of nice to walk down the street and visit with your neighbors who might be sitting on their front porches. So that's part of what I believe in as far as communities are concerned. And I would like to see, if possible, that we would promote the idea out here like they're doing down in Stapleton. I think it's really cool.
Great, thanks. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. I guess we've had one person leave. Just as a FYI, we won't be making any decisions tonight about appointments. We should know by the next regularly scheduled meeting, I would anticipate, and we'll notify people prior to that. So just I wanted to get that out there. Next was Aaron, if I can read the writing. Aaron, we've seen you in the past. Hello?
Yes, hello. I'm up here again. Thanks for having me.
Well, maybe one more time, tell us who you are, why you're interested in those
Sure.
type of things.
My name is Aaron Outwell, and I've lived here in Superior since 2001. When the last appointment came available, I did present myself to the board looking for an opportunity to join ProStack, so I'm up here for a second opportunity. Since then, I have just been coming as a citizen and going to the meetings. I've participated in a number of meetings just trying to learn a little bit more about ProStack and familiarize myself because I thought down the road I'd have another opportunity.
I might throw a gavel at you. If you have to have a conversation, outside would be perfect. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I'm really interested in having an opportunity to give back to our community, to kind of participate in some grassroots efforts, and just give some of my time to Superior. I live here. I plan on living here for a long time more. I have 2 daughters in school, and I'd like the opportunity to contribute.
Great, thanks.
So here I am.
They're beautiful. Questions? Questions? Big picture issues that you have with parks, rec, open space, trails?
Well, there's, in having the opportunity to come to some of the meetings, I've got to see some of the challenges in front of ProStack, and it's really interesting because, we have these surveys that have been completed, and now we have activities that are underway, and even with all that genesis, we still have challenges around setbacks and parking, and there's all kinds of issues that still need attention. So, I think there's always this dialogue going, and one of the questions about, you're balancing the interests of the board and the interests of the citizens, and, you can get in this really big circle where the information just keeps turning over. So there's a point, I think, where we have to get that information from the community and get it to you guys and gals, get it to the board so you have an opportunity to really make an educated decision on how we want to proceed. So I definitely see that as being a big piece of it, that there are a lot of issues and lots more challenges to come.
Okay. Great. Anything else? Okay. All right.
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
I believe I see
Ian's-
Ian has arrived. Let's do on the next person up. Unless Juanita is up for appointment. And Planning Commission, is that right?
Yes.
So I think several of us know you, but tell us a little bit about yourself and why Planning Commission is interest to you.
Hello, my name is Ian Elberson. I've been in Rock Creek since 2006. I'm currently serving on the Rock Creek HOA, been there since December 2008. I've just looked for a way to get me more civically involved in the city. As you all know, I ran for town council and didn't make it, but looking at this as my alternate opportunity to get involved, maybe lay the groundwork for the next time around. I'm interested in the Planning Commission because so much of what the town does involves development. So it's an excellent way to get to know what's going on in town from that perspective, how to help guide it, prepare for future offices. It would be excellent to know all those types of details.
Okay. Great. Questions?
Just a comment.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see you running for this position.
So,
That goes without saying for me.
looking at the, I always have to ask, but looking at your information, it doesn't appear that you have any conflicts of interest in terms of the Planning Commission, in terms of businesses or applications in front of the.
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And the big issues that you feel the Planning Commission needs to deal with, or do you have a thought about that?
The only thing that jumps to mind is if and when the town center section of town starts to develop, being involved in helping craft that.
Okay.
Possibly the rest of the property, there's not too many large chunks for development anymore.
That's true. Anything else from the board?
Did you intentionally wait till the Chapter 16 review was done?
Convenient.
I know you didn't have an opportunity before then.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I'm just sort of to expand on the mayor's question. You've lived here 4 years now. You've run for office, and I'm interested in sort of your overall sense of where Superior might go, or opportunities that you're excited about, or any sense of things.
I think Superior as a town is great already. There's always going to be tweaks here and there. I don't think there's any revolutionary changes that need to be made other than what may come of all this empty space we have over here with so many possibilities. It's basically a blank slate, so you could go in so many different directions. I think it'll really depend on the, at the moment, what makes sense. Given the shifting economy and all that, I've already learned that maybe the first vision wasn't correct. Maybe I have to try it again.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you again, Ian, for your interest.
So let's see. That means that Lloyd.
Lloyd indicated that he would be here between 5:30 and 6.
Okay.
It's coming up from Cherry Creek.
Uh huh.
Oh, that could be any time then.
Yeah.
It could
5:30
be
to
8
6
o'clock
or
today.
8 o'clock, right? So and then Matt. And did you tell me that
Matt's
not coming, right? Right. Okay. Well, let's see. Why don't we move on? We'll just do this on the fly. So if
Can we
Lloyd-
maybe talk about process?
We can.
Or
I
is
was
that
go-
in the context of the meeting, in the work session?
No, I mean, we can do that now. So the process that we've used in the past is usually I make recommendations to the board. But what I would say is that if people have thoughts about applicants, one way or the other, to send me their comments, and hopefully that we come with some, we might not have unanimity, but have some general consensus on the applicants and
And we're looking to resolve this by the 28th.
yes.
We had talked about, at one of the recent meetings, asking the chairpersons of the various advisory committees
Yes.
to basically propose a more formalized system of going through this process, how far in advance we take it before positions opened up, and whether or not perhaps the chairman would do the interview first and then recommend a set of candidates, et cetera, for us. Is that something we're still considering?
Yeah, I don't think that we've came to a conclusion about how that process would to occur. I don't have strong feelings about that one way or the other, so.
Is it I would like to see that. I think ultimately the chairman of each committee has a balance on his or her existing committee in terms of what makes that committee work. It may be, is it regionally diversified? Is it, whatever sort of levels of diversity matter on a particular committee. So I would like to see the chairman of the committee put forth a proposal as to what system might work best for his or her committee. So in that vein, the question is, will we ask the committee chairman, where we have few openings and more applicants, their opinion as to who seems to accomplish their objectives before we put forth our own thoughts on that?
So the answer is, we could certainly ask their opinion. So I'm just going to free associate here for a while. So the only issue with that is that perhaps one person making one suggestion would then potentially might not have the full consideration of the board, and so it's just one person doing that, and then you're wondering, well, is that a personal agenda? Not saying anything bad about anybody, but is that a personal agenda trying to fill something, or is that really trying to balance the organization out? And I don't. That would be perhaps the concern I might have. I might suggest that maybe having the chairperson's not a recommendation about who to appoint, but these are the issues that are a concern for him or her.
Or maybe these are the needs of our committee.
Uh-huh.
That kind of thing.
So.
I see Lloyd's here.
Yep. So. Yep.
2 points on that.
Yes.
With this list, it works perfectly. There are 2 times when it might prove to be a little bit troublesome. One is when the committee chair is currently up for reappointment.
Mm-hmm.
The second is, and we've wrestled with this issue, when a committee chair is one of the elected officials.
We have
When a committee
chair is an elected official.
The board has had the policy that town board members are free to be appointed to its advisory groups. It's very conceivable that one of your advisory board chairs could well be one of you. Easy. So in that instance, would you want one of the board members?
Well, I'm personally familiar with when that happened in the past, but
So might I suggest then, I'll just be in contact with, it would be really just Planning Commission and PROSDAC that are the issues, since there's more applicants than positions available, and have a discussion with them. And obviously everybody feel free to have that discussion as well, and I can take that input without necessarily formalizing how that would come to fruition. Does that sound like a fair plan? Okay, with that, I might butcher the name. Linnell is here, and maybe you could come and tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest, and if you wouldn't mind terribly at the mic, because I mentioned earlier there's probably 2 people listening on television, and they might want to hear.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me here tonight. My name is Lloyd Linnell. I just moved here to Superior August of last year. I had lived in North Boulder in the 90s, and toward the late 90s I moved back to Boston, or to Boston. I've never been there before. But throughout my working career in Boston, I kept trying to get back here, kept coming back and running the Boulder every year. And so I retired last year and moved out here to Superior. And actually, the choice of Superior kind of folds into why I even put my name in for this consideration for these volunteer positions. Our daughter had moved out here a couple of years ago with her husband in Superior, And so we had decided we'd move out here, and over the last 2 years, we would come out here 3 or 4 times a year and house hunt and spend time with our family. And, we looked over those 2 years as far south as Golden, and then all the way up to North Boulder, Niwot, Lyons, east all the way to 25. Covered a pretty wide area and an extremely wide kind of range of price homes and stuff. And finally settled on Superior, and I'd say the number one reason we settled on Superior was I'll say the outdoor amenities that they had. I won't use the word open space because it was a lot more than open space. It was, our son's going to a private school because he has some learning issues. In order for him to meet people, we wanted him to be in a community where there was a pool, a great place to meet kids. Having the walking trails and the little, I think you call them the tot parks, those were really important. Just being able to take walks on either the paved paths, or I'm a runner, so I really fell in love with Coyote Ridge, and I run Coyote Ridge almost every day. And we looked at houses that abutted Purple Park and just loved Purple Park, but finally I loved Coyote Ridge more. So, I can just jump on the trails and run up on Coyote Ridge. So when I saw the bulletin that talked about the openings that you had, the reason I stepped forward, I'll come to the meetings whether I'm appointed or not, so it's not going to break my heart one way or the other. But I saw that you had 4 openings, and I thought that's a real shame that a community wouldn't have people that would volunteer their time, and I'm retired and I'm looking for some way to kind of give back. So I thought I'd volunteer because I'd like to be part of continuing the process of refining the PROSAC long-year, multi-year plan, at least the one that I read was in 2005. I know that we're in the process of updating that, and then you can have to continuously kind of prioritize and update how you're going to spend the very limited funds that are available. And I'd just like to be part of that process, so I volunteered for both the local towns and recreation as well as the open space, considering that the two of those meet, and you have to have the trails and whatnot interconnect. Whether I get, appointed to either one of those is kind of, I would love to be a part, but I'm going to come to the meetings anyhow, so you'll see a lot more of me, because I just think that it's wonderful that the community has put that kind of attention to the outdoor amenities, and it draws people away from being on the couch and draws them into the outdoors. And I just think it's a wonderful draw for the community, and I think we should continue to have it for future generations. So that's why I put my name in for consideration.
Great, thanks. Questions? Joe?
Do you have a preference between OSAC and PROSTAC as far as an appointment?
Probably the PROSAC, the local. Yeah. Yeah, because I understand that, I think I could have more impact on the local one than on the open space committee, but that's, an opinion from a little bit removed, so that would be my preference.
Questions? Do you see areas for improvement in terms of the parks, recreation, open space, trails issues, or concerns that you've had while you've been out gallivanting on Coyote Ridge?
Yeah, well, I don't have any burning issues in the sense of I love all the trails. It seems like they're pretty well taken care of in terms of the muddy spots. People go out there and put gravel on them. I haven't run all the trails. I certainly would have to get more involved in running all those trails. Just from the few months that I've lived on the south side of Colton, we have that field across the street from the school that I know that there were some issues on. I'd like to see, right now it's just a field of goldenrod, which is causing a lot of people hay fever, so we'll probably have to do something about that, at least mow it or something. But so, to the extent that we could build something on the other side of Colton that helps, like the Purple Park kind of thing, that would be great as well. But I don't have any burning. I'm not a single issue kind of. I'm not here for a particular reason. So.
Okay. Other questions or concerns? So let me just, because I don't think that you were here, just in terms of, we were talking process about how this would occur, so no appointments are happening tonight. I'm going to get information from the board and suggestions in that I think by the next meeting we'd be able to make appointments, so, and let people know in advance. So, any questions for us?
No, I like coming to the meetings and listening to the debates. So
Great.
that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I did also, for the people that I didn't mention this at the beginning, so there's people that are interested in reappointment, and that I'm going to request staff give me the attendance records some of those will be hard, but especially, but Planning Commission would be the one probably that would be easiest to pull, just in terms of attendance. That would be one way of getting
The
some
chairman of the
information.
committees, however, could help on
Yes.
that question, too.
And recently there have been minutes, so there'd be some of that, but.
I sort of wish we would have asked some of these ProStack applicants before, Lloyd, whether or not they'd be willing to serve on OSAC as well. Do we have a sense for that, Scott?
Just what they'd expressed interest in on their application.
Yeah,
Okay.
And he was the only one that indicated multiple.
that's an interesting point.
Okay. Anything
Is there any additional information you'd like on the incumbents?
No,
other
just
than attendance?
Just attendance, as far as that's the only thing I can think of. So unless the board
I would
has-
say attendance and preparation, to the extent, for example, on Planning Commission, where preparation is expected, perhaps that's relevant.
Yes, I wonder how to
I'd
quantify
defer to the
that.
chair
though.
on that.
You know,
I don't think it's an issue on any of those three applicants, or those three incumbents.
I'm speaking generally.
yeah. No. All right. Thanks to everyone for their interest. Why don't we move on then to the Windy Gap water farming and water issues for the town of Superior, and I see the water attorney is here. So.
Those of you that have been on the board for a while, you've had the pleasure of being entertained by Mr. Zilas, premier water attorney in the state of Colorado. We are very fortunate to be represented by Paul, and he's going to give us what we refer to as Water 101, which will be talking a bit about the town's water portfolio, where it comes from, and also talking about the biggest upcoming investment in the towns in the foreseeable future, which is a multi-million-dollar investment in what we refer to as the Windy Gap Firming Project. So, Paul, I know you've got a copy of a PowerPoint presentation. You take it from here.
Great. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
I see some new faces. Welcome. I've been the town's in the district's water attorney for quite some time, and we kind of call this the state of the water address to give you an idea of our water rights, where we stand, talk about some of the big projects we're involved in. And as I move forward, please feel free to interrupt at any time with questions, because all I'm going to cover tonight is, water rights in Colorado, the entire Colorado Big Thompson system and Superior system. So that shouldn't take more than 6-7 minutes. But no, actually, I'm going to keep it short and kind of give you the basics. And then what I always offer, especially to newer board members or ones that want to review, I'm always available on a one-on-one meeting if you want to sit down and talk a little more detail. So tonight what I thought I would do is kind of go through first the use of water in Superior, look at both our potable and our non-potable uses, to kind of get an idea of where we're at for how much we're actually consuming, and then talk a little bit about the water portfolio that generates the water necessary to provide that service. And then, as Scott said, finally, we've been involved in a big project since 2001, along with 12 other participants, called the Windy Gap Firming Project. And I'll kind of step you through that and talk about our past involvement and how things are looking for the future. The other thing I'm going to do is go ahead and show you where we stand for the rest of this year, so you have a feel for what kind of shape we're in for water. Before I get started, there's just a couple things I wanted to go over, especially for those of you that haven't had Water Law 101. In water, we measure it in units that most people are not familiar with. For volume, we talk about acre feet, and an acre foot is 325,851 gallons. The easy way to remember it literally is the amount of water that would cover 1 acre, 1 foot deep. For rate of flow, we use a unit called cubic feet per second, and that's equal to about 448 gallons per minute. And the easiest math in all of water law is if you divert 1 CFS for 24 hours, you create 2 acre feet. And then the other thing I wanted to make clear to everybody is that when we talk about how much water we have this year and how much water we had last year, when we really get into the big picture, water years aren't really necessarily based on calendar years. And since all of our water rights were originally adjudicated for irrigation or for multiple uses, it actually goes from October to October, because that's kind of the irrigation season. Now, for ease of going through some of the numbers. I've broken some stuff down to calendar year, but as we go on, you'll see that the water year concept is kind of important. So the first thing I thought I'd do is kind of just step through how much water we've been using. And Kurt, what do I need here? Oh, down here. That was a prop. The potable water use in Superior is interesting because it's for all the indoor uses for both domestic and commercial, but then also keep in mind that residential lawns are irrigated with potable water. It's very difficult to get the permits to irrigate residential lawns with non-potable because you have all the safety issues with water quality. So what we did here is we added up all of the water uses to kind of compare to past years. And as you can see, in 2009, we actually used considerably less than we used in 2008 and 2007. And the reason for that is that the 2009 summer, if you remember, was pretty wet. So we really didn't use much water for irrigation, and that really kind of determines how much water we use. As you look at the, kind of the base water months, and by base water months I mean the months where we use water only indoors, it's pretty darn constant. In fact, in 2008 and 2009, we used the exact same amount of water for potable use of 81 acre-feet. Now, when you look at it graphically, you
Paul,
can
that chart said usage as the heading, but the subhead said potable water production.
right. And I did not try to factor in any system losses. That really gets into a can of worms that we could talk about at a work session or something. But towns are always wrestling with how much system loss do you have? Do you have any infiltration? You got all those kinds of issues. And right now, Kurt can correct me, but I think our water losses in the system are around 10%, which is a little high. We've actually got a grant pending for a water conservation plan that would actually fund some more leak detection and some kind of work we need.
Mine was much more basic than that. I'm a neophyte in water loss, so is usage,
Yeah.
this is a usage measure,
This is, yeah.
that first chart?
Yep.
Okay.
And sorry to digress. But anyway, as you can see, if you look at November through March, year after year, it's pretty constant, and then you get the big variation in the summer because you have less or more irrigation depending on the summer. And just to give you the big picture look, it's been pretty consistent for a lot of years now. Superior, from a water rights perspective, is pretty easy to plan for because we haven't had a lot of new development. So we always plan on up to about 1,600 acre-feet of potable use, and as you can see in 2009, we were a little under 1,400. Then we've also got a non-potable system that provides, untreated water and reuse water for the irrigation of parks and open space. And again, in 2009, if you go down to the bottom column, that 567 down there, that was the total we used from both reuse water. We have a pretty sophisticated reuse system. And then we have some irrigation ditch shears, and our total irrigation water was 567 acre-feet. As you can see, again, because it was a wet year in 2009, we're down about 100 acre-feet from water use in 2008. Now, from a water rights perspective, this is all great news to me. We're using less water, people are conserving, and I think that's a big part of it, too. I think people understand that you can't, water your sidewalks. From a revenue standpoint, if Paul Nillis was sitting here, he'd be thinking, we got to generate more water use. But the bottom line is this is really good news for the district and the town.
Well, can I, just with that slide, so this brings my question up about Monarch.
Yeah.
Do you understand what our agreement with the school district is? I've never been able to understand what that...
Yeah, it's an older agreement, and I think, to be honest, that revenues probably weren't collected for a few years, but I think the district's on top of it now, and they're billing Monarch. And it's basically they've got a turnoff off of our water line for irrigation.
Okay.
And as you can see, we do generate revenues. I don't have those figures with me tonight, but
Okay.
we sold them 50 acre-feet.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Then this is just a big long-term look, and as you can see, in 2009, we actually used less water than we've used since 2004. And again, it was a wet summer. There's no great magic to be taken from this, but generally, Superior, I think, has been very good at water conservation and really trying to keep the water use down. Now, when you look at these figures, the big issue is how do you get this water? And Superior's got a very good water portfolio that's been built up over the years. And what's really interesting is most of our water actually comes from the West Slope through what we call the Colorado Big Thompson system, or the CBT system. And our portfolio right now is made up of two types of water that come through that system. We've got CBT units, 2,080 CBT units, and windy gap units. We have 15 of those. There's a big difference between those water rates. The Colorado Big Thompson water rates are the senior better water rate. And in Colorado, the way you determine how much water you get in dry years is based on the seniority or the priority date. So CBT has a really good yield. It's about 0.7 of an acre foot per unit. And there's 310,000 units total in that system. What's really interesting is the CBT system is a very finite system, and there were 310,000 units authorized in that project when it was first built. And it was actually built in response to the Dust Bowl way back, where they needed more water on the Front Range. And so the CBT units, as I said, have a good senior priority, and the average is 0.7. The Windy Gap project was added on much later. It wasn't completed until 1985. They just celebrated their 25-year anniversary. In water law, 1985 is very junior. The reason that we have it, and the reason it's important to Superior, is that it has the ability to be reused. CBT you can only use once. Windy Gap you can reuse. So it's a big deal for the town to have that Windy Gap as part of its portfolio.
And before you move off that
Sure.
slide, if you wouldn't mind, so the Windy Gap, so thanks for the 0.7 for CBT. The Windy Gap calculation in terms
I'm
of...
sorry, yeah, that's a good point, Andrew. It was designed to yield 100 acre-feet per unit.
Okay.
And as we're going to get into tonight, it doesn't. The Windy Gap project, here, let me go to the next slide, is a very small reservoir. You can see it there toward the left of the map, west of Lake Granby there. And what it is, it's about a 600 acre-foot reservoir. It's very small, and it has a junior water rate, but it's got this reusability. And the whole idea of when it was built was that it was going to require another big reservoir to firm up the yield, and I'll get into that in more detail. But so the Windy Gap system generally empties into the CBT system, which is Lake Granby, and then it's pumped through the Adams Tunnel over to Estes Park, and then down the Big Thompson Canyon to Carter Lake. And then there's a pipeline from Carter that connects Superior to the whole system. So it's a huge system that we got involved in. And just, you must be asking yourself, why the heck did we get involved in that? The answer was that Superior was one of the last people invited to the dance, if you might say, for water. We're on South Boulder Creek, and Louisville and Lafayette had developed, and they basically bought all the senior water rights on South Boulder Creek, which is the source of water for us. So when Superior first started to develop, the only water they could get was Windy Gap water. They couldn't even get CBT units. So they started, I say they because it was most of the developers back then, started with 35 Windy Gap units. And the district has done a great job at continuing to sell some of those and get a balance in our portfolio, so we've got that good CBT water and enough Windy Gap water to generate the reuse. So that's kind of how we ended up where we are. So you look at that whole portfolio and look at what it's going to generate for the rest of this year. And as you can see, we've got about 2,482 acre feet that is in our account right now in Lake Granby. And remember now, the water year ends basically in October. Windy Gap ends on September 30th, CBT ends on October 31st, but it's basically in October. And we do try to lease out excess water to the agricultural community. Superior has maintained a great relationship with a lot of farmers. They've helped us, we've helped them, we try to lease water out. We've leased out 300 acre feet so far this year, and we should be in a position, in quotes, should be in a position to lease out more water here shortly. But this gets now to the shortcomings of the Windy Gap project, which is why we haven't leased it yet.
I'm sorry, before you move off
Yeah.
that slide. So Windy Gap prepay water seemed like that was a temporary solution to a bad problem. Is that an ongoing
Yeah, it's a really good question, because that's the ongoing solution right now until the Windy Gap firming project gets built, to firm up Windy Gap in years where you don't have it available. And what that does is, under this criteria with the Bureau of Reclamation and the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District, you can use CBT units under this interim operating criteria and essentially use that as collateral against future pumping from Windy Gap, and lo and behold, you can reuse Windy Gap under that system. Obviously, that's not going to be a good long-term solution for people, which is why we're in the Windy Gap firming project. But anyway, that's a good segue, because when you look at the Windy Gap project, again, it's this junior water right. It's got this small little reservoir. So having a junior priority in dry years, it can't pump because there's not water available under its priority. In really wet years, it's the first water to spill out of Lake Granby, because it was an add-on project. So when it's a really wet year, like in the 90s, we had about 4 years in a row where there was no Windy Gap. And Superior did a great job scrambling back then, but we never want to be in that position again. And it's interesting this year, with all of our computer models and all of our predictions and stream flows and snow gauging stations, it's still really hard to predict what the runoff's actually going to be. So this year it started out where in the fall, man, we're going to spill for sure. So we actually were proactive and stored a bunch of Windy Gap water in our little reservoir, the 400 acre feet. Then about midwinter, it was like, oh my gosh, we're way below average. There's no way we'll ever spill. But we kept our water to ourselves because we know how hard it is to predict this. And then sure enough, this spring it's been so wet, now there's a chance it's going to spill again. So what's really interesting is, going back to this slide, I mean, it looks like we have all this water available. But if the Windy Gap water were to spill, we'd lose 1,100 acre feet. And then we would turn CBT through this prepay program into Windy Gap to generate reuse. And I hope I'm not glazing people over here. But the bottom line is that we've got about 1,381 acre feet of CBT water that's in our account that is available to us. So that in worst case scenario, even if Windy Gap every drop spills, we still have a 25% safety cushion over what we normally would have for this time of year.
And how much Windy Gap prepay can you store? Or
Up to the amount of units you own.
Okay.
So that we have 15 units, we could do 1,500 acre feet. But the bottom line is, I think we're in absolutely great shape this year. Who knows if it's going to spill? I'll keep in touch with Scott and Kurt, and they can let you know. But right now I feel good about our position. And then if it doesn't spill, we'll be coming back to the board to lease out some water this summer. But it's one of these things where, you don't want to lease too soon. And who knows how much it's going to be leased this year, because if you've been watching the news, the South Platte is flooding everywhere. So who knows? But we're in good shape.
So when do you make that decision? July, August?
Yeah, usually July.
July.
Yeah. By then, really the peak of the hydrograph is over, and we should know. But right now, I just was at a meeting up at the Northern Conservancy District. Carter is within a half foot of the spillway. Horsetooth is completely full, and Granby has 6.5 feet left. So it's really running and gunning out there.
More sprinkling?
Yeah. That's
Sprinkle in the rain.
Everybody just, during the rainstorm, water the sidewalk. So as I said earlier, when the Windy Gap project was first conceived, which was back in the 60s, and again, in water law years, that's a baby. I mean, it's a brand new project. But they always knew that they need this other big reservoir because of the shortcomings. Granby just doesn't have the room in wet years, and in dry years there's not enough yield. So the whole idea is to store water when it's available on its priority. So in really good years, you'd store more than 100 acre feet per unit. In average years, you store about 100, and then in bad years, you don't store any. And the last little bullet there is what we just talked about, that in the meantime, Superior has put itself in a position where we can use our CBT water under this prepay program. But for the long-term solution, we need to firm up the Windy Gap water. So this Windy Gap firming project that we alluded to, it's a big dollar item, and I'm sure we'll all be talking about it a lot more as the next couple of years go by. But it's been pursued since 2001, and it really is a very simple concept. It's going to be a big reservoir about the size of Carter Lake, right next to Carter Lake. So what we do is we take water over here when we can get it, and again, store up in the good years so that we got it in the bad years. It's been pursued for so many years, and there's 13 total participants that several years ago, Hewlett-Packard had a big parcel of land right next to Carter Lake, and the participants have actually already bought that, so that we didn't get in a position where we got permitted and then suddenly somebody had us over a barrel to get the land. So it's really, it's been moving. And it's starting to really pick up speed. These projects take so much time with environmental impact statements and, all the analyses you need. God, they've looked at, I think, 1,200 alternatives were required under NEPA. So the benefits of continuing to move forward with this thing is, first of all, the diversification we'd have in our water portfolio. We'd have the senior CBT water, and we'd have our nice firm Windy Gap water for reuse. The other thing that we'd have is, once this is done, we'd have a really good, solid water portfolio where, if developers come in, unlike when Superior first started, where the developers were the ones bringing the water, we've got a really good pot of water that we can basically dictate the quality of development we want to see. And then the other huge benefit is that it firms up our supply in multiple drought years, so that no matter if we have 3 2002s in a row, we'd be able to get by with the system once we have that firming project. The big thing to keep in mind with the Windy Gap is it's the water that can be reused, and we've got so much invested in that reuse system. We've sold 20 units over the years of Windy Gap to generate money for all kinds of projects, water projects, and buying the CBT water, but 15 is kind of the magic number I think we need to generate the reuse water that we see it build up. So that's kind of how we settled on that. The most recent sale we had of Windy Gap water was in 2005. We sold the last 5 units that I think we should probably sell. So the scary numbers are the numbers for the Windy Gap firming project. And as you step through them, we've got about $900,000 invested to date. And the big dollars will come due in 2013 under the current schedule when it gets built. And I don't have all the numbers that Paul Millis has, but right now, it's my information that we could finance it ourselves. We've sold those Windy Gap units. We've earned interest on those units. We put a lot of money away. So it's really dependent on how this board wants to spend its money. But I think we're in probably better shape than most of the participants. They're also looking at group financing, so we could compare group financing to paying for it ourselves, see if it makes more sense to spread it out. But the bottom line is that I think we're in good shape to continue to move forward if that's what the board directs. And the schedule right now is for the final environmental impact statement to be issued on September 9th. So we're actually at a juncture where we could get some forward movement and see if anybody's going to file lawsuits, whatever happens with the EIS, but at least we'll have that final document moving forward. And this schedule is based on kind of moving forward through with the EIS and then the record of decision and then getting the design done and building the reservoir. So when you look at our overall situation, we went through the portfolio, which is the first group of numbers there. And, we do have some ditch shares. We use those mostly for irrigation. So we really are talking about CBT and Windy Gap. Our current demand, when you round it up to make sure we're safe, is about 1,600 acre-feet of potable and 500 to 700 acre-feet of non-potable. Then the question becomes, as we pursue the Windy Gap firming project, is what are we really building for? What does the final Superior look like? And I've only looked at about, 1,000 scenarios. But one good example is the town center, proposal that we've seen with different variations. And the variation that I looked at last would have a total demand of about 1,076 acre-feet of potable and 93 acre-feet of non-potable. And once the firming project is built, we could actually meet those demands. And keep in mind that when we do meet those demands, the developers pay us for our water rights. There's a water dedication fee component of our tap fee. And based on the fact that we've been in these projects for a long time, we base our dedication fee more on the market of what that water is available, and we'd actually come out ahead on the firming project. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. I can't believe you'd have any questions. I mean, but I hope that helps kind of given the overview. And then, like I said, I'd be glad to meet with any of you anytime you want to go over any details or answer any questions.
Okay. Interesting as always. Other questions?
Who are the other 13, or the other 12?
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of cities. In fact, it's all cities and districts.
Neighboring cities?
Yeah. And in fact, the project that brings the water down from Carter Lake, that's how people take delivery of water. So it's everybody on that pipeline that's coming down. So there's Fort Lupton, Fort Morgan, the Little Thompson Water District, which has the big water treatment plant at Carter Lake, Erie, us, and the lake.
Los Angeles.
Actually, we're keeping it from Los Angeles.
And so we had talked in the past about selling a couple more units of CVT water to help finance. Is that, you think, though, it's best to hold on to all of that?
Right now, given the flux we're in on what kind of demand we're going to have in the future, if we don't have to sell it, it'd be great.
Okay.
If we had to sell CVT, we could easily finance this. But we've looked at a bunch of scenarios for that, and right now it looks like we can do it without selling it, which really puts us in the driver's seat for the future.
Great.
And Paul, can you tell us what a CVT and what a Windy Gap share go for? most
Yeah,
recently?
that's a good question, because CVT has varied a lot, and as you might imagine, it's at a really low price right now because there's no development pressure. So right now, you can get CVT units for about $7,500. At its peak, it was $16,000, and I use an average of $10,500 to $11,000 per unit. And then Windy Gap units are actually a deal if you just buy the units because you don't have the firming project. But they're about $600,000 per unit, but again, that's 100 acre-feet.
So in terms of, if I could, the problem that we have with reuse water is that we can't store it in the wintertime.
Right.
And so is the 15 the number that we need for the max at the summer irrigation season, or is that, I was trying to do that calculation and I was unable to do that math.
That's not your fault because the percentage that we get to reuse changes with each month. So for the winter, it's about 90%, but in the summer it's down as low as 24%. But yeah, when we looked at all the mix, the 15 acre-feet should be plenty to generate that amount of water. If we have a lot of additional outdoor irrigation in the summer, way more than what we're projecting here, we probably have to get some additional storage. But right now, I think we're in good shape.
Okay.
Plus, keep in mind that we've also got the ditch shares for that summer peak season.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Anything else? And the other, Paul, you said you have this in your checking account?
I thought it was petty cash. Yeah.
Petty cash. All right, perfect.
What is the gap today? We have roughly a $14 million investment. It's less than 4 or about 4?
5 to 6.
Within our water fund. Correct. And you would consider doing an inter-fund transfer to cover the rest of it, or?
I would, unless amendments 61 passes, perhaps all bets are off. Perhaps another item for
Amendment 61.
Thank you for another informative session.
My pleasure.
It's always good to have you here.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's always good to be here. And like I said, give me a call if you have any questions.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
That brings us on to the review of the next agenda.
A couple of these items are placeholders, but we're hoping that they're going to be in a position to present to you at the next meeting or possibly the following. We are currently out for bid on the original town street improvements that are included in the FY 2010 budget. It is anticipated that we will be, and depending on the discussion later this evening, it is staff's desire to pursue a process similar to what you'll be considering tonight for the reconstruction and resurfacing of portions of Indiana. That's item C. Item D, we are currently soliciting bids for street striping, which is an annual project, and I believe we're budgeted at $100,000, though the last 2 years we've been able to deliver that at a substantially lower cost contractually. Item E, it's referred to and has been referred to for many months as the power purchase agreement. We're actually anticipating that there will be 2 different approvals here. One is the actual purchase of 2 100-kilowatt solar, ground-mounted solar installations, one for the water treatment plant, one for the wastewater treatment plant. The second part of that would be the financing agreement, which we are currently in negotiations and very close to finalizing with Key Equipment Finance up on McCaslin to be our financial agent or loan officer, loan agreement, if you will, for the financing of that equipment. Bottom line, we expect to be purchasing almost $800,000 in solar panels. Our lease payments, including a balloon payment at the end of 5 years to Key, we will have bought the systems for approximately $248,000. That's after Excel rebates and after 30% federal income tax credits. And the best that we can calculate, Key is making about $18,000 off of that $800,000 5-year loan. Great deal. So very pleased to be bringing that.
So this has to be done this year, then?
Yes, we actually applied for the Excel rebate back in December. Has to be completed within 12 months. And we also locked into what's called a REC, or it's a renewable energy credit. We're currently getting them off of our rooftop installations. I don't recall the exact amount that we're getting in terms of that credit from Excel for the alternative power that's being produced. But we've locked into a rate, and again, we have to have the installations completed by, I believe it's December 1st, in order to maintain both the $400,000 rebate and the REC credit. I believe it's 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour off of those installations. And this is, again, all part of the board's couple-year initiative that said we wanted to be energy self-sufficient within a decade. Items, I have 3 items for the, assuming that there will also be some appointments, so that we would add that to the list. And then at this juncture, we'd had 3 items for discussion at a work session. One was a few minutes set aside to talk about how the board would like to proceed with its review of Chapter 16 and have some options. Whether you want to just take, like you did all the rest of the chapters, whether you want to do it page by page like the Planning Commission did, whether you want to have a subcommittee, there are a number of options. We'll lay those out for you, but the board needs to decide how it wants to review the very voluminous document that the Planning Commission just concluded. The second one had to do with our scheduled meeting with the Planning Commission. We've been, over the course of 5 months, wanting to schedule one meeting. This would be the meeting for the month of June, that we'd be meeting with one of the 5 advisory boards, and then have set aside at least 30 minutes to discuss the notes from the board's May strategic planning session, at which time we reviewed and modified the 2010 goals. I shared a report on that, and would like to take some opportunity at the next workshop to review that report. Do the notes adequately reflect the board's guidance and decisions? Are there additions, deletions, edits, and the like? We also, for those that are short-term, within the next year, year and a half, we've put, from the staff's perspective, when we might be able to deliver on each of those goals.
Andrew, if I may ask about review of the 2010 board goals. One of the discussion topics is going to be the Economic Development and Retention Council that I proposed. I have a previous commitment during that meeting. I won't be at that meeting. And I'm wondering if we might be able to postpone that discussion until the July 12th meeting.
I don't see any problem with that. Okay. Then, do you want to go through, let's see, is anything else on the digest that we haven't?
A couple of items, since it has been 4 weeks, some of the information may be somewhat dated, but you have had at least 3, if not 4, digests. We gave you a preliminary update on the Morgul. I believe Juanita might have some additional information during public presentations tonight, or board reports. But we did receive more than $50,000 in in-kind contributions. You've seen where the revenues and expenses were at the conclusion of the event, though we do expect the final accounting to take almost another month. But most significant was the racer feedback and the fact that our target, we had hoped to attract 340 racers. We ended up accommodating 700 racers throughout the course of the weekend. From a financial perspective, three items of note. Sales tax, again, for the month of April, we're up. In April, we were up 5.23%. For the year, we're up 9.36%. Again, further better numbers than any other municipality, either Paul or I have been able to identify. Vehicle use tax has finally rebounded. We had a great month in the month of June where receipts were up 68% over last year. For the year, we're up 8%. And building permits continue to do well. We're up 12.3%. So while we've gone through the process of developing the contingency budget and preparing for the worst, it looks like our major revenue sources are performing very, very well through the first almost half year.
Great.
Can I ask about the building permits year over year or something like that? Because you're looking at compared to last month?
No, year to year.
Thank you.
We are continuing to work with our counterparts in the city of Louisville and attempting to get an interchange committee scheduled, though you understand what some of those difficulties are. We are working with Boulder County regarding some federal stimulus money that they've received, almost $13 million for residential and commercial energy conservation, which they would like to use, the county would like to use to augment or subsidize the climate smart interest rate proceeds, and we'll be piggybacking on that. And then last, you had the follow-up items from the last board meeting, which I'm sure does seem like a long time since I believe it was 4 weeks ago.
Great. Anything else?
I have nothing else.
Okay. Might as well take a break till 7 o'clock then.
Very efficient interviews.
It's been on my computer on. And then on this one, this is the application for everybody who tell me what the steps are, when we'll have it done, all that. We don't file it. And should we do resolution on 60/60 these days?
Yes, people are putting together draft resolutions, so the answer is yeah, I would do that one.
I gave Phyllis
All right, let's see. Everybody's here, ready to go? Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for June 14th, 2010. And Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Sure. Mayor Andrew Muckle.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elia Gagoras.
Here.
Trustees Joe Cirelli.
Here.
Chris Hansen.
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skumatz.
Here.
Deborah Williams. Town Manager Scott Randall.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Hardy.
Brings us to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda by trustee Schoonow, seconded by trustee Gregorus. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. I don't know. Trustee Pennington, would you like to start?
Well, in the 3-week off period, I participated in a lot of meetings. I went to DRCOG with Deborah, and that was a big learning experience. I expected to take about another year or two of regular attendance to understand the nuances of everything they do.
Yes.
There's another one coming up on Wednesday, and I will attend it with her. She's the primary, I'm the alternate, but she'll be back in town for that. Attended a historical commission meeting, so learned about that as well. And that's a group of very dedicated volunteers, I find. And then I attended 3 library board functions. The Louisville Library Board, I met on an informal basis with some of the library, the director of the library system, and then the volunteer group, and then a formal library board meeting, and then was a participant in the library board's presentation to Louisville City Council. And I think I can safely say they are delighted with the collaboration with us and very eager to include Superior residents into what they call the Louisville Superior Library System. So I see nothing but positive things coming forth in the future on that. We may have this on tap already, but I would strongly encourage a debriefing of the Superior Morgul. I don't know if we can participate in that postmortem, or if we can at least receive a somewhat detailed postmortem from staff to that details where we were real successful and where we had some weaknesses, so that we can lay a template down for success in the future.
So, Mr. Randall, so I'm going to use the term, can I use how about a pediatric checkup instead of postmortem?
Yep.
Because I'm hoping that it'll continue on into the future.
Oh, that's just a journalistic
Yes,
term I
know.
use.
I know. But, Mr. Randall, I think that you have been discussing that particular issue.
By all means. I know Director Dominguez is here. There was a debrief amongst the organizing committee last Wednesday for 2 or 3 hours. There will be another. We'd be glad to pull together a written summary of all of those findings and recommendations for changes, or you can get it piecemeal. I.e., if you'd like something now, I'm sure Juanita can give you what we have to date, but it will not be all inclusive.
Nope, having it inclusive, I think, would make more
Okay.
sense. Okay.
Right. We do have another, like I said, DRCOG this week, Historical Commission meeting on Friday coming up, if anybody wants to join us.
Thank you for attending, Dr. Cog. It's mind-numbing after a while. So, Trustee Gregorus.
Well, I was going to bring up the Morgul Classic, and I was going to ask Director Dominguez for some feedback today, but if you want to wait, we can do that. Clearly, the amount of racers exceeded everyone's expectations, almost double what we had expected, so that part is great. When I went there on Saturday, it was not as well attendance as I would have hoped. It was very quiet. So, just a couple of thoughts. I was wondering if it would be considered for next year, maybe cutting it down to 2 days instead of 3, or doing it a different weekend now that the Boulder, maybe just some. I would like for us to revisit this actually, and ahead of time. I know we only had 4 months to put it together, so given the amount of time we had to prepare, I think we did great. But for future, I can see this thing growing by leaps and bounds. Just want to.
Why don't I suggest that we put this on a work session that we have some time so that we can actually have all those questions
Okay.
discussed.
I'm good with that.
So, okay. Let's see. Went to RTD directors meeting discussing the US 36 corridor, and they, I'm not sure exactly, they approved our $15 million application or whatever. It's not really an application, but we're in support of that for US 36. I think they actually have to do some other formal actions, but it was, I think, well received. I went to an urban drainage flood control district meeting. There wasn't anything in particular, and that applied to Boulder County. So let's see. Went to ICSC, the International Convention or
Council of
Shopping
Centers.
Centers. I'm going to leave that to the town manager to go over, but in general, I think it was well received. And that US 36 mayors and commissioners had a meeting, and it was really talked about. Really, there weren't any huge issues at that time. There was a need to identify 2.5% match for the local commitment to the corridor. There's plenty of local projects that have been done. But I think the match will be used in lieu of actual cash payments, so I don't think that that's going to be anything that we'll have to pony up any particular amounts of money. So, and then I had a nice conversation about trails over across Colton, and that there might be some that would be beneficial to extend. It's not something that I don't think we can really hash out here at the meeting, but would suggest that maybe we could either hear back from ProStack about some of those at an upcoming meeting.
Are you talking about towards Rocky Flats or?
Well, there's three that I think, two are near. I mean, I guess ProStack and staff have identified 7 possibilities. When I looked at that map, it looks like at least 2 seem to be reasonable. Didn't seem like they'd be too cost. It's hard to see because I didn't have the topo in front of me, but 2 seem like they might be able to be done by the Youth Conservation Corps when they're in town doing some stuff. And then there's the Rocky Flats connection, but I think that that's a little ways out because Fish and Wildlife, I don't think, have finalized their trails plan yet, so I think we have some time to think about that.
Plus, I guess we'd have to work with the county on anything.
County, yeah, and we have to get across 128 and stuff, so. Okay, that's all I had. Trustee Skumatz?
Briefly, for those who are in the pool trying to participate in the Climate Smart Loan Program, there's a holdup thanks to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are having a problem in that they don't want anybody to have senior mortgage rights over theirs, and the way that this is, or senior rights sort of over theirs. And the way that this is structured, the first sort of payment comes to Climate Smart, and so there are some very entertaining letters going on between the two. With the one that I saw back from all the communities that have Climate Smart around the nation is all adjusted Vice President Biden. So it ought to be interesting to watch what happens.
Okay.
So it's at that level.
Okay.
I had a meeting with Ann Livingston, the Climate Smart, or the Sustainability Coordinator for Boulder County, and they were successful in winning a $75 million grant with 2 other counties, and we're good for a good chunk of that. And she has an array of things that we can participate with on that, and it doesn't require very much effort on our part, but we get additional audits and stuff for energy and water stuff in our buildings, in our homes, and we'll keep you posted on that when those opportunities arise. I did a wildlife restoration in what seemed to me to be Verhey property, but I'm not sure exactly where the line ends. So went through that path and whatever.
Did you get shot at?
I did not get shot at. I didn't know that was an issue, and I might have reconsidered. But in any case, they took what used to be a straight, what way back used to be a meandering creek, turned into a straight creek thanks to Excel, back into a meandering creek. And I learned something, that if you plant sticks of willow in the water or in ground that hits the water, it grows roots. I didn't know that. We were planting sticks, a lot of sticks. So anyway, as well as potted plants. But in any case, there were a lot of volunteers. I'm going to guess 100 volunteers or something. It was pretty active. Volunteered at the Morgul for a couple of the days that it went on, and it was very impressive. And there's a CML conference coming up in about a week or so, and I'm hoping that some of the other folks attending will help hand out Skumat swag so we can get on the executive board.
Swag.
Yeah.
Swag.
Thanks.
Swag with swagger.
And then the last is, an RCAC meeting was held this last week, looking at budgets as well as how the events have gone and what we're planning for the future.
Great, thanks. Mrs. Hurley?
Okay, well, I too was very impressed, had a great time at the Morgul Classics. I passed that on to everybody involved. They did a fantastic effort. Certainly, there's lessons to be learned, and I know we're working on collecting those, and that's what Elia and Sandy brought up, is, collecting that and making it even bigger and better next year, or, tying everything together better. But the races were tremendous, and it was a blast riding up and down McCaslin with it closed on Sunday. That was a lot of fun, and ringing a cowbell for the riders and stuff. I attended my first Rocky Flats Stewardship Council meeting along with Trustee Hansen, and very interesting. Met a different group of people than, well, I knew some of the DOE people, but different group of local people that hadn't been involved with before. Big news there is that the Department of Energy has released a draft environmental impact assessment, I guess it is, at this point, proposing to, they have 3, I think, dams on the east side of the flats that they're proposing to breach so as to not collect water. They don't, it's, in their point of view, that the dams are, they're there to collect surface water and prevent runoff and measure and things like that. But those dams were not part of the agreed upon remedy for the long-term monitoring of Rocky Flats. So they're proposing to breach those dams and not be in that business anymore, is my take on it. And the Stewardship Council has submitted comments, primarily adopting the comments of the downstream communities, those being Westminster, Broomfield, and North Glen. And they're all concerned with this too soon to make any big changes like that. And, what if something goes wrong, you don't have a backup plan and that kind of thing. So that's the big issue going on. They're also, as part of this, going to be a second release coming up of, they're proposing to change where they measure compliance of surface water runoff on that, change those points, and that's something else that's, they're going to identify where those points are soon and then have another comment period. All of this is supposed to come more to a head later this summer in July and August, and so Stewardship Council is they have a normal meeting in September, but we've agreed to have a special meeting in August in order to be better prepared to address what we think the Department of Energy's position on the draft will be, that they'll release at the end of July. Anything further regarding that, I'll let Trustee Hansen speak to, because I know he had a special opportunity the next day regarding that, so I'll let him talk about that. That's the big thing.
Okay, thank you. I also attended the Morgul Classic. Took the family down. We didn't view much of the race, but we got a lot of infield time. It was a lot of fun, especially the Velcro jump house. It was a lot of fun. Attended the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council, my first one, and then the next day, actually I can't say any better than Joe did, but the next day we actually got a tour of Rocky Flats, which was really neat. All green, lots of wildlife out there, and we got some good detail about the history of Rocky Flats from the 1950s up to now. So looking forward to future meetings. Let's see. I attended a ProStack meeting May 19th. There was some public comment about the swale in the park in Original Town, and there was some concern that the irrigation boxes might be too low moving forward, so it might be something we want to look at. There was also planting discussion regarding the perennials And it was kind of determined that it would be more costly to put perennials in, and the maintenance costs would go up, but Juanita was going to review existing information and possibly talk to CoCal and confirm that, without going into a formal bidding process to see if we could get some kind of a rough idea of whether it was going to be more expensive or not. Let's see, we also discussed the 3 parks, of course. There was some confusion because it was brought up that the town manager wanted to have or review 1 row of parking, and it wasn't clear if it was an alternative or if that was the new direction. And we just wanted to make sure it was clear that that is an alternative that we wanted to look at and see what it possibly would cost. And then we also discussed that we might have wider parking stalls that would make fewer of them as well. 50-foot barrier. Oh, the grant was requested with a 50-foot buffer, and there is also some concern of how that would be affected if we decided to go back to a 30-foot or 40-foot buffer from the creek. So that, again, is going to be determined. And then, of course, if all is approved, then we begin construction in August. Attended the annual chamber dinner. Always good food, good people.
Congratulations to you.
Thank you. And then I've also proposed a community forum on renewable energy and green remodeling. Working with another gentleman named Jeff Tucker. His company is Greenworks 2020, and we've proposed a date, or we've secured a venue for Wednesday, July 21st at El Dorado K8. And the idea is to have several green professionals that specialize in various areas such as solar paneling, green roofers, HVAC, window suppliers, among others. They would each come in, give their presentation on what they do, how it could benefit the community, potential rebates that are available. I spoke to Scott about getting a possible grant, if it was possible, through the town. He referred me to Lisa Nybarger at RCAC. She liked the idea and referred me to Jay Wolforth, who I discussed that with today, and he said that we possibly could get some money from RCAC. I'd asked for between $500 and $1,000. It looks like the budget's going to be closer to about $1,500 to get the thing done. So I need to find out how I proceed with that and secure the funds to do that.
And this was for the leasing of the space, or is that?
Space, yeah, El Dorado, printed materials. We've hired Daryl McCool to do our graphics for us. We're going to get some signage that we're going to put throughout the community. Other signage to go into the local businesses. This forum would also include local businesses that could we could determine, they could see how they could reduce their operating expenses and be up to date on green remodeling.
Would the participants in the forum be willing to pony up some money since they'll be presenting?
We did discuss that, and Jeff's going to be talking to them as he gathers their information. We weren't sure how much to ask for them, but we thought if we got 10 of them, if we got $50 a piece or $100 a piece, that could cover quite a bit of the cost. But we wanted to make sure that we had everything covered.
Okay.
Unfortunately, you just missed Thursday was a board meeting, was a meeting of the RCAC. It would have been a perfect time to present it.
Yeah.
Yep.
You might have heard me whisper congratulations to Trustee Hanson, and while I wasn't at the meeting, I have heard that he was awarded the Volunteer of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce, so congratulations to you.
Absolutely.
And then the other part of the community forum, I wanted to see if it was possible through this budget if we purchased some CFL light bulbs that we could give away to the first 50 attendees or whatever. CML conference, planning on attending next week with Sandy. And then I got a little email this afternoon from a gentleman who's got some concern about the noise from the airport. And I responded back that I would mention it here and try and figure out who we get in touch with to say that their levels of noise have increased and how we can mitigate it.
So the people that got involved with the airport is the FAA, and we've talked to them on. I think there's actually a complaint line at the airport.
They usually have their own dedicated complaint line.
Yeah.
And then, so it goes into a message.
Yeah.
Yes.
That maybe somebody might listen to sometime.
Sometime, some year.
All right. Is that our only solution at this point?
We all signed something when we bought our homes about that airport.
Right.
Yeah, his
Find
concern
the
was that
disclosure.
when he bought his home 15 years ago, it wasn't as much of an issue, and it's progressively gotten worse. So at the time, he agreed, but not to the levels that it is now. And I don't know if he's got any quantifiable data.
The airport is owned by Jefferson County. It's regulated by the FAA, as the mayor had just indicated. We have absolutely no control over aerial rights, flight patterns.
I suppose we could complain.
We have complained, particularly at some of their significant events like the upcoming fly-in, about the low flies, the early hours, all of the rest.
Yeah.
Actually, when he was Congressman Udall, he actually penned a letter, I think, to somebody, but you just can't get, well, maybe I'm being too pessimistic, but it's really hard to get any action from the airport since we don't have any control over them.
Does he mean normal commercial, or is he talking about the F-16s?
No, he's talking about commercial off hours.
There's
early in
been
the
some
morning.
flyovers.
Right.
I'm reading the Pacific right now, and there's been some reminiscent things.
Hopefully they're not dropping anything on us.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
If I might just mention on perennial costs, I would be interested, I know Juanita and Jim are both here as well, certainly in the short term, perennials are more expensive, but I think the relevant thought is the long term. And so I would be interested in, as we set up a format for reviewing this on an ongoing basis, to see what the net cost is over the long term of adding perennials, maybe not exclusively, maybe a perennial annual mix. So I would like to have that assessed economically over the long term.
I would make a recommendation that we study hard the long and expanding diet of our local population of rabbits before we invest too much in perennials.
Actually, could I ask, so I brought up the issue about some trails over by El Dorado K. Was that discussed in the ProStac meeting, or do you know where that?
It's been brought up two ProSec meetings I've been to. It's come up both times, and a couple of the issues were that it was being too expensive to do, or the grade is too steep. It may not be feasible to do.
So, all right, well, Director Dominguez, if you have anything to add to that.
Juanita Dominguez, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. We've been talking about the trail plan as part of the budget process with ProStac for the last 3 months. The particular area you're talking about was evaluated by staff and staff engineers regarding some potential new links. And Trustee Hansen is correct that several of those links would be very costly, and it's in the waterway. And that's one of the biggest concerns. I know you sent an email today talking about 2 specific pieces of that particular trail. One would have to go over the urban drainage area,
All right.
so we would have to cross it somehow. And the second piece would take that trail up along the maintenance path and then back to, I believe it is, I want to say it is,
Mount Sopris?
no,
Being the
it's
road?
South Torres Peak. So it's South Torres Peak. And so the difficulty there is, do we want the kids crossing the creek? And if we do, we want to make it safe. That may require just a bit more than having, our Boulder County
Yeah,
Youth Corps go
once
out there.
again, I didn't have any topography, so it was a little hard to look
Right,
for
so
a map,
it's difficult, and the space that we're talking about is in that area from Mount Sopris, where there is a maintenance road that urban drainage uses to clear out on the east side, and then there's another maintenance road on the west side, and a lot of people mistake those two roads for trail access, and they really don't go anywhere but into the drainage. And so,
Okay,
That's
so,
it.
but this is an ongoing discussion, or is that,
So-
or is that been
so in
decided and done?
Well,
at
in the last couple of meetings, I explained to ProStac that we evaluated it, and those particular links were eliminated from the budget. It's link 12, which are several different links, and if they chose to, as a group, wanted to restudy that and place it back into the budget for future years, they could do that, but that wasn't moved upon at the time.
Uh-huh. I guess what I would say is that if there's some that can be done, we're not going to be spending $400,000 to put a bridge in through, an drainage area, but if there's some that are, relatively easy to be done without a whole bunch of expense, I guess that would be nice. But, once again, I haven't studied this in great detail, so.
If I could, as a resident of south of Colton, the kids use that area to cut across from their homes to get easily over to El Dorado K-8. And the fact is, they are crossing over that water by stair-stepping across the rocks and making sort of a game of it. So I certainly would be on the side of acknowledging that it sort of has a use and a reason for being brought up time after time, and if perhaps pros might consider, is there a way to actually formalize a trail of some sort within that corridor so we can direct the traffic the way we want to direct it, rather than have the kids sort of jerry-rig their own trail?
Yeah, so directing the traffic the way that essentially it should be is keeping the kids out of the drainage way and keeping them on the sidewalks in a lot of those locations and keeping it safer. And if we wanted to do it formally, I do believe that we would want to do it safely, so that we would want to place a bridge over those two areas. One of the areas that you're talking about, I believe, is more closely related to the Mount Sopris area. And from the Mount Sopris area, it makes more sense due to the fact that they're coming to the school. But this particular link that I think the mayor is talking about, it actually is going away from the school. But still, it's part of our trail plan that we put together each year, formalized trail plan that ProStac looks at each year. This one particular item, number 12, was eliminated this year due to the fact of the cost. We can put it back in at any time. It looks like the best time to do that would be in 2015, where the funds would be more available to do something like that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Sure, Mr. Payne.
Jim Payne, 2475 Clayton Circle. I chair ProStac. I don't disagree with what Director Dominguez has just said, and I understand those issues. I just want to say that there have been citizens, residents in that area who have been commenting on this before the board and before ProStac, going back for almost 2 years now. When we looked at it, it's quite clear that the connectivity, which is one of the goals of the comprehensive plan and the PROST master plan, is seriously lacking throughout a lot of that open space and drainage area that goes from South Torrey's Peak to Mount Sopris to North Torrey's Peak on the east side of Indiana. And I'm just suggesting that we look hard at ways of improving that. I don't think 2015 is I'd like to see it done. I think it should be looked at, ways of doing that before 2015, because it is a deficiency in our trail system.
Maybe the best way to deal with this would be that the budget cycle will be coming up here shortly, and that all the committees the recommendation is that they weigh in on these things and have suggestions about what they would like to see, and so then we can see whether or not there's money available to do any of that stuff. So that might be the best way to approach this,
and possibly bring in the El Dorado K-8 parents and community, because some of this does have to do with the residents' perceptions of better ways of getting their kids to the school.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Next step on that, then?
Well, what I would say is a formal step would be that ProStack would make a recommendation during the budget cycle that we would like to see X, and so we can figure out what the dollar, obviously we're not going to do any engineering associated with that, but if it looks like a big ticket item, that would have to be put into the budget cycle somewhere. If it's something that can be done, if some of these can be done through the Conservation Corps during the summer, fantastic, but it sounds like, at least from this discussion, that none of these trails really fall into that category. And some of this is, my fault, once again, just looking at the map. We're all aware that there's a lot of hills in the area, and that, some of these things have to be taken into account, so.
As one of many things that the board will be looking at during its review of its 2011-2015 budget, one of the elements is a 5-year trail plan. Mm-hmm. And the goal of the last couple of years has been to create, to fill in the gaps that exist within the existing trail network. And there's annual allocations made through that from a specific funding source. So what the director was referring to was to pick a new project and move it up means something that's already been in your plan gets pushed back.
Correct.
So the phrase easier is put it on the tail. But if your advisory committees recommend and the board accepts a recommendation that reprioritizes,
yep,
that's the time, that's the place.
Yep. Okay. Anything else? Anything from the town clerk?
Can I ask a question regarding the dog park thing? We had staff put out the stakes. Mm-hmm. And at what point do we as a board weigh in on our observations of those distances? Do we wait for the next
That's what I would
Park
say, is
East?
that the next time it comes forward, because
Okay.
we'll have to sign off on a contract and
Okay.
approve the thing from GOCO, so I think, at least from my perspective, that was the best time to weigh in on this.
And we're supposed to hear about the grant in the next couple of days, right? Yeah. So maybe after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trustees comments?
My only concern would be that maybe if we wait until after we've already got bids, then the bids will have been set with a particular setback, and might change the cost. Or you're not talking about that point?
Yeah, before that I guess we could ask, there will be bids set out to do this construction, and I guess that we could put in, alternates.
Correct. And that's why we're including alternate bids
Thanks.
in many of them, whether the board decides to go with a 10-foot versus an 8.5-foot wide parking stall, 48 versus 24, a number of different alternatives that have already been built into the bid documents in anticipation of those questions that you've raised to date. If there are new issues or questions, please let us know. But based on the ones we've heard so far, we're designing a bid specification to accommodate that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Setback from creek is,
Okay.
That affects the linear footage of fencing.
thank you.
Anything from the town clerk? Thank you, Mr. Randall.
For the sake of brevity, no further report.
You want to go over, I donated ICSC to you. You want to go over just
Briefly, you received both a response or a summary of notes from the board's retreat. I've heard from a couple of you, would appreciate hearing from others. If there are questions, comments regarding those notes, it will be a discussion item in 2 weeks. You also received a fairly lengthy report showing the 30-some plus or minus contacts that were made while we were at the shopping center convention, split between developers, retail prospects, hotel prospects, and a lot of effort and time spent on meeting with existing businesses higher up in the corporate ladder in terms of what we would call retention. A couple of others, but very productive. One of the things, and I think this was my 13th consecutive ICSC, more favorable, more positive feedback immediately in the shortest term. We've been having meetings, as you've been kept abreast of, with follow-up contacts that were generated at that conference in every sector, hotel, retention, and retail prospects that have some interest in facilities within the town. And again, it's happening faster. So whether that's a sign of an uptick in the economy, whether that was just the great news that we were sharing with them, But it's been very, very encouraging, more than I've ever seen in that 13-year experience.
And
we'll
Mike-
keep you abreast every week in the digest.
And I would, just congratulate staff on putting, together a good information in the flash drive that everybody appreciates as opposed to lugging home papers. But I agree, I've only done this now 3 years, and it's been the most positive reaction I've seen. And even people that I thought we had left with a negative reaction were the people that called back the soonest to set up meetings. So it was, I think, very productive. Obviously, no contracts were signed there, but, I think it was productive in that manner. The interesting thing is that I was trying to look for sit-down restaurants throughout the entire convention center. There wasn't a single one there, so I suspect that they're still struggling in their segment of the economy, but hopefully that'll come back soon. But I congratulate Mr. Randall on putting that all together. Ms. Carberry, anything
I
from
don't
you?
have anything, thank you.
All right, that brings us to item number 5, which is public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. And name and address, if you would, for the record. Welcome, George.
Good evening, Board. George Kuffman, 109 South 4th. Approximately 15 years ago, Mayor, prior to your time, I requested some work be done on the alleys in town, and at that time we were told, and maybe after you were here, that we didn't need to do any work on the alleys because we were going to bury our electric lines. If you remember, promise we had that we was going to bury electric lines when they started burying the electric line on Coal Creek.
If I can rephrase that, there was a hope that the electric lines could be buried. I agree with that one.
Well, we were under the impression that they were going to be, and since it's changed, may we have a little work done on the alleys? I asked the town manager, and he said, bring it to the board. I've asked the director of public works, bring it to the board. There's about 5, 6 of them. Would need a little bit of grading done to them, and some recycled asphalt put on them, which would improve like it did when you put recycled asphalt back at Town Hall here, and the next one up you did. There's a few more that needs done. That's a little bad condition. The one on the south end of town.
So I'm going to say, let's see, so I'd love to bury the electric lines. Unfortunately, Excel is very difficult to deal with, and the dollar figure that they were mentioning was like in the $1 million category, if I remember. This is several years ago, so that put the kibosh on the burying and the rest of those lines. And a mea culpa, because it's on my tickler file of things to do, is to talk about alleyways in general.
So part of our plan.
Yeah,
when we look at the roads.
Yeah, so that's my fault, but I think that we actually need to have a global discussion about what to do in the alleys, just in general, whether or not to, I'm not suggesting anything in particular, but, putting in asphalt, putting in concrete, vacating them. I mean, there's a whole big thing that we could discuss, and I think that we should, because we've never really taken a holistic approach to the transportation down there. So I think that we should do that sometime, that we could have a conversation about.
I'm referring to the one that we use all the time. I'm not referring to freeways, making the alleys freeways. Mayor, I'm just
I agree. Yeah.
Little work done on them that they need graded out, and some recycled asphalt put on them. That we're going to be recycling asphalt, I think, here on some of our streets. I'm not sure, but if we don't, we can sure get some from the state, some way or the other, recycled.
Yeah,
Just
without committing one way or the other
like
about
I
what
say.
we put down, I think that we should have that conversation. So
If you would like to get with me,
we could either have a work session, or
like
I
to
don't know
get
if
with you
Mr. Randall, if you're talking about
And
this
your
at the staff
memory is
level.
correct. We had actually penciled that in for a discussion last August or September, and then we had a change in Public Works directors, and his ramp-up, that got delayed.
Yeah.
And it's overdue.
Yeah. So,
But
maybe.
the board's discussion was not this alley or this alley. It was the global issue
Right.
of how do we want to deal with the alleys that do exist within the community, and what is the standard at which they're going to be maintained.
Yeah.
It's simple to put a grader down and level. It's something else to change its composition.
Okay.
And we'd be
Well-
glad to schedule that workshop at the first opportunity.
That's what I'd recommend. So.
I appreciate that very much. And the next question I have on the number 5, public comments and consent agenda items. I'd like to see you people have a work session on this. I don't like some of the numbers they've got from A to H here, I don't ever recall this being brought forward to a town board and being discussed of how this was to be worked out. Since we've had one town board member bring up about a tax on people, I think the whole thing needs looked over, not just that item, period.
Okay.
You recall ever to bring this before the board? I don't ever recall it ever coming before the board, and it was done after Mr. Randall come here, and it could have been approved by, I'd like to know who.
Okay. I don't think the board necessarily approved it, but we did have a conversation about this because of we've had several.
The board dealt with, the board was given what we called the Enhanced Communication Plan July of 2009. There were about 13, if I recall, about 13 items on the plan, one of which was to establish quote-unquote protocols for the conduct of public meetings. That was discussed at length at a public work session, and this was the final outcome, one of the outcomes to that particular item. The others were things like the Citizens Academy and broadcast of workshop sessions, and I believe the production of relevant portions of executive session minutes. All of those things were discussed as part of that enhanced communication plan. This was one of those items.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me. Okay.
Be kind if you have a work session on and get it kind of straightened out. I kind of feel Speaker shall refrain from personal attacks. I have civil rights also. I'm not attacking the individual, but it just don't quite sound right the way that's worded in there. We do something a little different there. And also, I don't like the one down here where the mayor shall decide whether the comments are the board. I think the board should be able to make their comments themselves, Mayor, because they're elected also.
And I would have to say that I don't think that there's been a council member that's been shy in responding when they feel like they want to respond. Thank you. So at least that hasn't been my history. Thank you. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? This would be the time.
I was waiting for the appropriate time. My name is Bob Wilson. I gave my card to the clerk there. I live at 11480 West 66th Place, and this community's given me a little problems lately. But I had a wonderful drive up here to say I'm running for the RTD board in District L, which is Superior east of McCaslin. The present director, my friend Wally Pulliam's term limited. I asked Director John Tare, who's endorsed me, to come. He serves Superior west of McCaslin, but he's busy as always doing this, that, and the other. Busy guy, great guy. But I'm running for the RTD board because I believe in transit. I want to see all of Fast Track's built. I met the mayor down there at the RTD Board of Directors meeting, which I've been going to for the last 2 or 3 years. My wife is, in effect, a Tuesday night widow because, hi, dear, I'm not coming home for dinner. I'm going down to the board, see what they're doing, learn what's happening. And I think, Mr. Mayor, your testimony, along with Mayor McNally, Chuck Sisk, Mayor Sisk, was effective in moving forward the US 36 bus rapid transit HOV lanes to do all the things I've been reading about lately, TIFIA loans and putting finances together, $30 million from RTD, probably some from CDOT, some from Dr. Cog. But why am I running for the RTD board? Passionate about transit, believe in it. It's what my wife calls my professional hobby. Let's build all the fast tracks. Also, I was very pleased to hear about your sustainability efforts in the solar. For 30 years, I've been working as an electric systems engineer, power systems engineers for the Department of Energy, and part of my work involves interconnecting wind farms and things. But part of the reason for running is promoting sustainability in the Fast Tracks project. I serve as an outside member on the Fast Tracks, RTD Fast Tracks Sustainability Committee, got to get that right, and offer up ideas on energy conservation. I'm quite sure we're going to have solar and solar thermal on the commuter rail maintenance facility up in, I believe it's Adams County, 40th and Fox or so, promoting things. And also, a big issue is 1/3, I have this from 2 or 3 sources, 1/3 of the people in the Denver area do not drive. They choose not to, they're too young, high schoolers, older citizens, I don't like to drive at night too much, and maybe they don't have the financial resources, or they just choose. They want to live near transit, transit-oriented development, as an article in the Denver Post commented on, pay a little more for rent, pay a little more for property if it's near existing transit. But with that, that's what I'm interested in, asking for your help, your support. Been attending the US 36 Commuting Solutions meetings and its predecessor for many years, joined when it was possible to join as an individual. And I think an important thing for an RTD director is to keep their ears open, their mouth somewhat shut, but represent the district, represent L, which is a conglomeration of cities, most of Arvada, all of Golden, a little bit of Wheat Ridge, a smidgen of Lakewood, all the way to the Gilpin County line, including Wonderview, and the Boulder County line, and this part of Superior. So I just want to say hello, and if you have any questions, if that's appropriate, I'll be glad to try to answer them. If not, I'll make something up or research it.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd just ask you to repeat your name since I was writing.
Sure.
And I'm sure you don't mind doing that for that camera either.
A camera? It's Bob Wilson.
Great.
And you have the address there, right, Claire?
Yes.
Yeah. In Arvada. It was a beautiful drive up the prairie, the short grass prairie. Rocky Flats is beautiful with the setting sun and all the moisture we've had recently.
Yep. Great.
Let me know any town issues. Be glad to work on them. Turn me loose.
All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thank you
Mayor
for coming
Pro
today.
Tem
Thank you.
and trustees.
Okay. Great. Additional public comment on consent agenda, non-agenda items. Seeing any, that brings us to presentations. I don't believe we have any this evening. Next is the consent agenda, and on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the May 10th, 2010 and May 17th, 2010 Board of Trustees meetings, acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission and the Open Space Advisory Committee meetings, consideration of an application for a permit for alcohol on public property, and an adoption of a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County for polling place locations. And I don't believe that we're spending any money. Is there a motion by Trustee Gregouris, second by Trustee Skumatz? Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 8, which is a public hearing regarding an ordinance modifying the Superior Municipal Code regarding uses related to medical marijuana. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing. And Phyllis, you have proof of publication?
Yes, I do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Randall?
This is the second reading of an ordinance that will technically amend Chapter 16, which is the town's land use code, and specifically this particular amendment would ban the sale and cultivation of marijuana. Since the first reading of this ordinance on May 17th, your Planning Commission conducted its own public hearing and rendered a recommendation in opposition to this particular ordinance. The vote for that was 4-2, with 3 not in attendance. They also came back with a second motion that said that they would prefer to regulate the sale and cultivation of marijuana rather than the outright ban. Yet, based on the board's previous actions, including the moratorium and public statements that have been made regarding the issue of not wanting to see this particular use in town and lobbying for that inclusion in the recently enacted state legislation, which does permit municipalities to regulate or ban such uses within their borders, staff's continuing to recommend your favorable consideration.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Trustee Sorelli?
Have we, or prior to the moratorium, have we had any applications for, were there any pending?
I don't believe there were pending applications. We had a couple of inquiries about both available space and any existing regulations, which
And
none existed at the time.
Second question, the governor did in fact sign the bill that we're talking about?
Yes.
He did. He signed it last week.
No further questions on my part.
Any other questions from the board? Public comment regarding this particular issue? Don't see any. Discussion amongst the board regarding this issue?
I would actually like to ask the rest of the board the question whether or not they heard from residents one way or another, any opinion on this issue.
Trustee Gregorius?
I have from several residents, and they're against it.
They're against,
Having,
they're for the ban?
they're for the ban, right?
The only informal input I'd had was from a member of the chamber who commented that where, from his knowledge, where there was existing medical marijuana distributors, I believe in Louisville, that it did not seem that it was really medical users using the facility, but that's just notional information. I did not hear anything from residents for or against this particular item, except for the Planning Commission's position.
Trustee
And
Gregorius?
one more thing I would like to say, generally, I appreciate the Planning Commission, the input and the work they're putting out. I would just have to disagree with them on this particular issue.
Okay. I guess my comment is that, I think this is a prudent action right now. It's, if people want to go to a dispensary, they have only to go across the highway, so it's not that we'd be limiting access to it. I have not had anybody approach me saying that they're greatly desirous of having anything in their community, and it gives us the opportunity. It's hard to, if you approve something, it's very hard to pull that permit back, and it's always best, at least in my mind, to be cautious in approving things, and we could still, in the future, regulate it or permit it or whatever. So I think this is probably the best action, and we could have a consideration about putting it to a public vote eventually. So I'm strongly in favor of this.
Choose as a board not do that too, though, right? We don't
Certainly.
have to have-
Right. People
don't
could
have to have
people could
public
petition
vote.
to put it on the ballot, or the board could recommend.
That's exactly right.
So I don't think we're limiting any option here. Going to keep giving the maximum amount of flexibility, I believe. Further discussion about this? Okay. Close the public hearing, and unless there's anything else, entertain a motion. Trustee Gregorius?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve Town of Superior Ordinance number, is this O or 0?
It's O.
O?
For ordinance -6.
-6, Series 2010. An ordinance of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior amending Chapter 16 of the Superior Municipal Code to prohibit in the town certain uses related to medical marijuana.
Motion by Trustee Gregorius, second by Trustee Skumatz. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We might be on the cutting edge of this particular issue at the moment, but we'll see. With that, brings us to item number 9, adoption of resolutions for the reconstruction of Indiana Street from El Dorado Drive to, Colton Road. Mr.
The current year's capital improvement budget does call for the reconstruction of Indiana between Colton and El Dorado. And the original estimate for this project, when the budget was put together, was between $1.1 and $1.2 million. Since Kurt's arrival, we've completed a more thorough analysis of the underground pavement conditions, and it's resulted in a plan that calls for the replacement, the full replacement, reconstruction of portions of Indiana, but not the entire distance between Colton and El Dorado. The balance would receive what we call the mill and resurfacing, very similar to what the vast majority of the community received last year. Where the soils are stable enough, where the pavement is shown, not the degradation, the waves, the roller coaster effect that we've seen in a couple of them. The process also is different tonight. Instead of the traditional engineer's design and construction estimate and then contractors bidding on that job, Kurt has developed a new process, at least for Superior, called the Guaranteed Maximum Pricing Contract. It has still been competitively bid, though not amongst the entire universe, with a pre-qualified group of potential bidders. He's going to walk you through all of that, and then we'll wrap this up after his brief PowerPoint presentation. Kurt?
Great, thanks.
Good evening, Board. Kurt Carr, Public Works Director. Thanks for the intro on that one, Scott. I want to try and make this quick, and I tried to summarize, I think, in 6 slides or so, the process we've followed and what we're going to do, where it's going to be at, why we went this route. The green on this slide here is basically our project area. In El Dorado Drive to Colton Road. Colton Road's on the bottom. El Dorado Drive's up there on the top. Christie Way's the street approximately in the middle. The areas in red are the portions that we've discussed that we'll reconstruct, and I'll explain why we picked those portions. Could include or will include 30 to 45-day varying road closures in the area. Most significant impact will be at Bristol Street. Still will have two outlets for the neighborhood to the west of Indiana. So I think it's Devon that comes off of Eaton Circle there. Denzel. And then off of Andrew Lane there. So those would be those two exits would stay open. Christie Way would stay open, obviously, for that circle there. And there may be some jockeying in the intersection for some sequencing, but for the most part, we have discussed this with Rocky Mountain Fire, and we'll be coordinating with everyone. There will also be a communications plan that goes out to the neighborhood, so everyone's kind of aware of what's going on and when. When I approach this project, my philosophy is if I haven't developed a project myself, I kind of try to go back to a bare bones and figure out why we're doing what we're doing. And like Scott had said, this was a reconstruction project from El Dorado to Colton Road. Well, it's expensive to reconstruct things, so we kind of looked at why we're doing it, what are we doing. Also, this is our first big project. This is my first big project with the board. And since coming here, I've heard some things and I've seen some things, and I guess what I've heard and seen is, we have some issues with quality out there. Why did this go in and now it's not lasting as long as it should? I think there's been concerns regarding possible oversight on projects, and how if we had people looking over this project, did we go over budget, or we had all these change orders and we couldn't stay on top of these things, or why did the contractor do these things and now it's our problem and not their problem? So I tried to take in everything I had heard over the last 6 months or so, and then come up with a game plan on how to address those things. And in that, my goals were, let's be collaborative. Every successful project I've worked on in my other lives, it's been because everyone, including the contractor, has been on board with the project and wants it to work. We got to minimize our risk as a town. I think most of the complaints are from not minimizing risk. When I say minimize risk, in the short term, the minimizing the risk is our budget. How do we control these projects so that we don't have surprises with the budget, how they don't overrun? The other area where you minimize risk is your long-term. Coal Creek out here. It was an expensive project for the town. If you go out there and you look at it, it's not really surviving well. It's deteriorating very quickly. And those backdoor deteriorations add up. You just spent, $1 million on a project, and it should last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, but at year 5 and 6, it's already starting to fall apart. Those things catch up with you, and those things are what causes your CIP to lose ground. So minimize risk, minimize costs. Again, that's on the budget level, minimizing our costs. Let's not just go out and assume things. Let's surgically dissect these projects and make sure we know why we're doing what we're doing. And again, minimize those back-end costs. Whatever we do, it's got to be competitive for fiscal responsibility. And then quality ties into all of those things. But I think quality is a key issue where we can make a difference in the field here as we move forward. So I threw that in just for our overall philosophy on projects. So I'm going to make you guys all expert soils engineers here in about 30 seconds. I don't think it's any joke what Superior deals with is soils. And we have some of the world's most expansive soils. So there is a very technical way to figure it out, but if I simplified it, this would be the categories: very low, low, medium, high, very high. We have soils that are low to medium most of the time in our roads. We also have some spots that are very high. We've got homes that are on very high, and then the neighbor next door could be on very low. It's very
Low to medium what?
I'm sorry, I got to go on. Expansiveness, right?
Thank you.
This chart here, this percent is percent expansiveness. So if you had 1 foot of expansive soil, that foot could expand 13% higher. So that's what I was talking about there. Thank you for clarifying.
I thought you meant we had 2% of the soil was very low expansiveness.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's I got to go over this slide too fast.
Thank you.
The other thing with soils is they happen in layers. You have different layers. They're also called horizons.
Could you do me just a flavor? Thank you, Phyllis.
Okay.
Just so people that were interested in hearing us at home.
Sure.
Thank you.
So to clarify real quickly, the slide is the expansiveness of the soils from very low to very high. And in 1 foot of soils, you could see that a certain percentage of expansion as an example. The pits.
I saw a flash a second ago.
Yes. Those mine. Oh, all right, that's what threw me off. It's going over there.
Are you playing games over?
Very good. All right. So you have different layers here with your soils, and they can be of varying depths. But what I think is important to understand is you have different layers, and within those layers, you can have different types of layers embedded. So one thing that happens in Superior is we have different layers, and one of the bad layers is claystone bedrock. Here, the claystone bedrock is very expansive. So you could have claystone bedrock like this, and I could be standing over here by the town manager, and we could have very low expansion. You could walk over here by the screen and be very high. It's that localized because this bedrock is it's scattered throughout. So that's a problem we deal with. We're dealing with it on our roads, on our homes, and it's some of the most expansive soils in the world. So it's a challenge. Mother Nature here is a real challenge. So we have to. That's what we have to take into account when we approach each of these road projects. Any questions on soils in that quick introduction? Okay. So when we looked at Indiana, we said, okay, what did we build out there, and what happened back in history when it got built. And so what we did is we went out and we did a geotech boring, and what that is, there's a rig, and we bring it out and we drill down 5 feet, 10 feet, and we pull out the soils and we start to identify where those different layers are, what types of soils are in those layers, and what are the properties. Are they expansive, very expansive? Are they a little expansive? And so we did this on Indiana. And the other thing we find out is how thick is the existing pavement, and does it have a good subgrade under it, or was it just thrown on top of soils? So to orient you, if I were to take this slide and turn it up, that's what you'd normally be looking at if you looked on a map. So this is El Dorado right here. We would drive south, and this is Christie Ray right here to orient you. And then when Indiana got built, the green line is what went in. So the green line is if you went out and you took the road and you just sliced it in half and looked at it from the side, this is how it looks. So it basically, as you're driving along Indiana, you start to go downhill, and that's what you see with the green line. Does that make sense? Okay. The brown is what was out there before. That was Mother Nature before we touched it. So that's the existing ground. So these red lines here, you're going to start to see some patterns. These red lines here are the areas. So between this area, this is one portion that we're going to reconstruct. I'm going to come back to the soils borings here. So we did these borings, and there's going to be more on the next slide. But that is the spot where we bored on the road, and then that's the expansiveness of the soils. So what we found is areas where if the brown line is below the green line, that's areas of fill. That's where dirt was brought in. It was filled in, the low areas, brought up to grade. Areas where the green line's below the brown line, that's where we went in and chopped off the soils. And essentially what you're doing is if you're chopping off the soils, you're getting closer to that bedrock. So this red line here is an area that we'll reconstruct. I'm going to go to the next slide real quick. Now if you follow that same pattern, we have our dots here. These dots are where we did our borings again. You can see we have 6.5% in a fill area. It's okay. It's still measurable. We get the 13.5%. That's really high. And if we start looking at our lines and we say, okay, what's going on here? A little common sense. You can see the road. We really went down in this area where you see what I'll call the roller coaster down there. So we got closer to the bedrock. So what we're able to do through doing the geotech borings and looking at the old documents is we said, well, wherever we did cut, it looks like we've had a problem. That's because we got closer to the bedrock. And when we work with the geotech engineers, what they describe these things are is deep heaves. So deep heaves is not something that's happening right at the surface. It's going on 10 feet below, 15 feet below, maybe 20 feet below. And so what's happened is over time you cut down, moisture gets in from irrigation. That bedrock, it's like a spring. You take some weight off of it by chopping off the top of the hills, and then you introduce water. It kind of weathers and loosens up, and next thing you know, it springs. That's how it gets so expansive, and that's where you see where the roads pop. So we took all these things, and we said, okay, well, we don't need someone to redraw where the road is. We're not going to make the road higher. We're not going to make it lower. We're not going to move it left or right. It's just going to be right there. So we know what we need to do. We know we need to construct. So in that, we start to develop our project team. And this is through our RFQ process. I pulled in what I thought were the 3 firms that were pure construction. They either constructed things or they managed construction. And we had a discussion. And I'm going to go skip a few slides. We had a project discussion about this project. I said, here's what we want to do, and how do you guys think we should attack it? Here's some ideas on how I might attack it, but you guys are the ones that do it every day. So let's talk. So they kind of gave me some project proposals, some informal letters. They said if we were doing this project, this is how we'd address it. This is how we go about it. And the guaranteed maximum price was kind of a common thread in how everybody would address it. Guaranteed maximum price project is a type of project where you develop a project with, depending on the complexity of the project, you would hire an engineer and maybe take them up to 25, 50% design. Bring a contractor in, and then you develop that project with the contractor. So that at the end of the day, when you get to where you want to build the project, you have a contractor or contractors who've been on board. They agree with how the project's going to be built. They understand it. They give you a guaranteed maximum price, a lump sum price. We'll do it for this price, and if there's problems, it's our problem. So we started this process. In the town, we didn't have this delivery mechanism within the town. So we worked with the town attorney, and we developed a standard template, and then we turned around, and Project 1 did the development of the standard template. Their area of expertise is project management, contract development. They're doing things with Thornton, Denver Museum of Science, Denver Water, a lot of big firms or agencies. Been doing the same type of process development. We put an RFP out. We gave it to ECI and Taylor Course, who again is working from our RFQ shortlist. And this was an official RFP at this point. Had issue date, and they had to submit it by a certain deadline. And basically, what the process that we created was they had to submit, and you kind of saw one of the tables in the board memo, an IGMP, an initial guaranteed maximum price. Here's how much we think we can build this project we've developed with you for. Here's how much we need to pay for the gas in our trucks, the printers and the paper, and here's how much profit we want. So total cost, general conditions, and percent fee. And from that IGMP, we met with ECI and Taylor Coors and interviewed, and we selected Taylor Coors. And so the process that we developed was, okay, once you've been selected as a successful IGMP candidate, what you need to do is you need to go out to the universe at that point, and you need to bid out these portions of work. You need to bid out all the subcontracts, get us competitive pricing. And so where that's a little different is then they brought all those bids back to us, and we saw all the bids. We saw everything they brought in from the street. On a hard bid, what you'll get is you just get your prices. You get the general contractor's price. We never know what their subs are charging them or where they're putting money. So one area might be cheap, and we think it's expensive, and they make a lot of money in that area. So they bid out, and then they submitted everything that they bid out. They bundled it into a package that had to come in below the IGMP, and they did that. They brought it back. And that was the final guaranteed maximum price. And so from there, we said, okay, we're ready to build. What do we need to build this project to minimize our risk? Project 1 has the experience of managing these projects, and we are recommending to continue on with them with their project management experience. Taylor Coors will be constructing. Rick Davis Consulting is an independent consultant with a lot of years of experience of watching these projects go in, making sure they go in to a quality and a standard that will last a long time for us. Ground engineering is a geotechnical engineer. They'll be watching the asphalt that goes in, the soils, making sure everything's compacted and the right densities and various things like that. So that was the process that we followed to get to this point, and that's the project team that's in your board memo that we're recommending tonight. And from that, that's a quick overview of where we are, what we're doing, and how we got to this point. I'll open up to questions.
Great. Trustee Sterling.
I've got a few questions, but
Sure.
starters, did the bidders have the opportunity, or did they participate in the boring, or did they just take your results or our results when they were developing their?
They participated we got the final report, and then we sat down with them and talked about it. And we talked with the bidders about it with the geotechnical engineer. And is this the right approach? Are there better approaches and things like that? So we did. The benefit of this process is we had ECI and Taylor cores for the last 3 months now have been along our side developing the scope of this project.
Secondly, as I recall in your write-up, there's 5 proposed subcontractors, something like that, that are going to be working for the construction contractor.
I believe so, yeah. Quality Paving, Highway Technologies, WL Contractors. I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head.
Are they locked in, or could they be swapped out after the?
They are locked in, and they are actually locked in as a lump sum. So part of this process was ECR Taylor Course, whoever gives us the best value, we're locking you in on this FGMP. So Taylor Course's approach was, well, then we're locking ourselves in. So the benefit of the price you're paying today is based off everything we've given them and everything we've directed them to do. They told their subs to go out and estimate the project. The subs weren't even given quantities. They said, you go out with your estimators, you tell us how much it's going to cost to do this work. And they're locked in lump sum.
And the third question, if you could give me a nutshell, if you would, of a distinction of this kind of contract from a firm fixed price contract.
Sure. Firm fixed price contract, more traditional delivery would be, we would hire an engineer to go out and come up with the schematic. And they'd probably say, we want to go survey it and do all these different things. And they come up with a design and basically a set of plans that look very similar to what I've shown you here. It would just be updated. And it would very discreetly identify all the areas of work. And then the engineer would estimate the quantities. That we would put together a set of bid documents that would go out to the universe. And with those bid quantities, then we'd have contractors bid on the quantities that our engineer developed. And so at that point in time, when you get out in the field, if the engineer clicked the wrong button in his CAD and got the wrong number or rounded wrong or something, those things are our problems, because in the fixed price firm bid, they bid on a set of unit costs and a set of quantities. And by state statute, we have to pay them for what they do. So, that's where we're at risk, because we always have relied on the engineer to develop these things and build them for us. And I think we've lost quality and had errors in quantities that have caused problems.
So in this contract type, they get to the guaranteed maximum price, job's not done, still incumbent upon them to complete the job at the price they've given us.
Yep. If Quality Paving says that, hey, we think it's going to take 4,500 tons of asphalt to build this project, and it takes 5,000, that's not our problem.
And the final question I had is a term that which I was not in construction contracting per se, but a construction observation position or contract is a new term for me. Is it equivalent to an inspector?
Yeah, inspector. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, Trustee Kurkos.
But, Kurt, I'd just like to commend you for your presentation, and I think for the transparency of this process. I don't think anybody in the 4 years that I've been on the board has really explained a project of this magnitude in the detail that you have, so I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Trustee Skumats.
I guess a couple of questions. One, I've been one of the least happy with this sort of construction contract arrangement that we had in that whole process. But if you could go back a couple slides, I do have questions. So thank you for thinking of a different option.
Which slide were you thinking?
Oh, the one with the names of the firms on it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sorry, forward. Nope, keep going.
One more.
Yeah.
That one.
There we go.
So from the beginning, you involved a maximum of 3 firms?
I did. The RFQ shortlist, I think, was 46, 48 firms, and then that's what's submitted. 56 sub-consultants. We got it down to 12 firms. Of those 12, maybe 4 were landscapers, 2 were water, wastewater guys, 5 or 6 were generalists, and then I think these guys were the leftover construction guys. And going into this, I wanted construction people. I didn't need someone to tell me how to design this outside of the geotechnical engineer. I know how downhill it needs to go, and I know where it is horizontally. So let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just talk to the people that know how to build this thing and do it for the best value we can. So that's why I picked those 3. They were construction oriented from our list.
So out of the
12.
40 we own, out of the people interested in our project, only 3 were really qualified. And one of those was a project manager, two were construction people.
Yes. And I would
So our
and
competition was kind of between two, in a sense.
It was. And part of this process, the IGMP, we had the ability to see so their IGMP, they actually had a full list of line items. We said, rip out asphalt, thin concrete. And they had to submit to total that cost of unit cost. So at that point in time, I looked at it and I said, okay, what's the bid tabs for Denver Street program coming in right now? Erie, Lafayette, Louisville. I had 4 or 5 communities and I looked. So I compared our IGMP unit prices to the unit prices out there for 2010 right now. Every one of the major line items and most of the minor line items. So when I say major line item, that's like $200,000 or $300,000 it cost to us. Minors maybe 10 or 15. They were either the low or within the top 3 low prices. So at the IGMP, we reviewed the process for its competitiveness, not in the number of people we had, but the pricing. We just reviewed it on the actual pricing.
Okay. Then the next question I had was, so you mentioned they've been along with you developing the scope. Now, as a consultant, that's an ideal situation, right? For me, I can, you can kind of make the scope be something that favors you, and therefore you look really great. I think this is a little bit different. I think this is something where the job is make a road, make it flat, make it stay flat, right?
Yep.
I mean, so that's maybe developing the scope is here just figuring out what the engineering characteristics are that have to happen or something like that.
Yeah.
But the end product is still get a road, get it flat.
It's that simple.
Okay, I'm just trying
Yeah.
to explore
the
that.
biggest thing was, do we close the road? Do we not? Does it cost more to have it down or have it up? So.
One of the things I think, one of the reasons we're able to get a guaranteed project maximum is because this is not time and materials up to a guaranteed project maximum.
It's just lump sum.
I know,
It's
I'm
not
saying-
time and materials.
And there's no way to get them to do that because they're taking a risk on the on the loss side. Is that right?
Actually, the way the project, they went lump sum, and so
of course.
let me. Taylor Coors is lump sum, and they would have normally pulled in their bidders, and then some people will pull in their bidders and get low unit costs, and they kind of work off the quantities they came up with, but it would have been on time and materials. But Taylor Coors went with lump sum with their contractors, so that made it their subcontractor's problem. It's a little, how do I explain it? It's still an open book process. Everything they do and get paid for, they have to submit us all the paperwork. And it's not paperwork like, here's our line item list and we did 10% of this work, so we get this amount of, we get $100 because the line item was $1,000. It's more like we actually put down this tonnage, so we get to see it. Let's
say they put down less. Let's say they put down less asphalt, and everything else came on exactly as they proposed or something, and that total is less than our guaranteed project maximum. Do we pay them the guaranteed project maximum, or do we pay them for the
still
less?
pay the guaranteed project maximum.
Because that's, even a house,
Well,
you only pay
we've-
for time and materials up to the max,
for their
right? So
risk.
I'm confused about why it's not time and materials up to a max.
We estimated this project ourselves, so we feel it's right where it needs to be.
In essence, we're paying them
It's
For the risk.
for their
risk.
assumption.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's why- that's what I
for
s-
risk.
Absolutely.
And could that happen? Yes. Are there a lot of places on this type of job to cut corners and make that happen? No. And then have we sat down with, as the town and looked at it, we sat down with the town in Project 1 and looked at it. And then after that, we sat down with each of the contractors and looked at it. So we feel the numbers are where they need to be. That in itself is a big variable. If you look at our 5 asphalt bids, they vary from 500 to 1,000 tons of each other. So it's somewhat of an art.
Okay. And then, so time and materials up to a project max is what I might have hoped for, but you're saying that's not where they're coming from, and if it turns out that's what we're paying in order to make sure we don't go over.
Yes.
Thank you. And then the last thing I want to say is, what is our insurance about quality and years of quality and all the rest of that stuff?
Right. Well, right now with this process, 2-year warranty on this contract, which is our contract standard, 2-year warranty. But we're testing with ground, so we're looking to make sure compaction is right, density is right. We've got a geotech reviewing all the concrete mixes and asphalt mixes to make sure they're a type of mix that's durable and not just some cheap mix. So all the other auxiliary consultants are the quality control that's in place. Behind that, we did pull off the short list, and if we can show this was competitive, it was a good process for the town, we may recommend continuing off the short list, maybe add additional short list contractors. But there could be an incentive for them. There's another incentive there, too, to perform and have the product pulled up.
2 years seems way too short if we're talking about this is supposed to last 10 years where NIFTA is failing at 5 and 6. So
it's kind of the industry standard right now. I mean, we can do whatever we want with our warranties. You pay for the warranty the same way you pay for the guaranteed maximum price. You have that risk to pay a premium because Taylor Cores is putting in $800,000 and most of that's in soils and asphalt and concrete, right? And their profit on this is like $30,000. So if they put together a bad project, and in 2 years is about the time when the stuff you can see that there's problems. If they got to come in and do warranty work, it doesn't benefit them. They don't get more money later on to correct. And like if you use Coal Creek for an example, that project had problems in warranty. If you drive down there, somebody got talked into putting a gray coat over bad concrete to cover up a product that's going to fall apart. So it's really incumbent on me to do my job and the people that work for me to do my job.
2 years concerns me. But.
Trustee Pennington?
I would echo what Trustee Skumatz is concerned about in terms of expansive soils. If that's the core issue that causes these projects to fall apart, 2 years may not be enough for that expansiveness in the soil to manifest itself. So that is something I guess I would study. And I actually commend staff and you on what I call the innovativeness of this solution. So I'd actually sort of throw the challenge at both, since your innovation here, can we actually be innovative in terms of our warranty requirements that maybe treads new ground on warranties? But definitely I would ask what kind of due diligence we did on these particular vendors to see what their track record is with expansive soil work. Were you able to do that? Do you know where they come in on that?
Taylor Cores did a re-stuff over here, which has had some problems, and they're working through that. They were the overall. It was a different structure over there. They were kind of the overall site manager, and they had prime contracts for like the road or buildings or whatnot. So their prime contractor for roads had some issues with their compaction. And that's on that prime, that's not on a Taylor Cores, but we did go check out their project. They did self-performance in a lot of areas out there, and those areas are holding very well.
How long have they been in?
I don't know when Reese has been in several years now. 2
Yeah,
years.
not tremendously long, though. So I'd maybe throw out if we can get some sense of longer term.
Yeah, I think a couple, in regards to the expansive soils, the approach we're taking to correct the issue, that really hinges on HP Geotech, who did the original geotech report. This is their recommendation on how we minimize our risk with the roads going up and down again. So if there's any issues with the expansion, that actually will fall back on HP Geotech. They've engineer stamped that report that this is the most beneficial way to go. We're also having Ground, who's our construction geotech. We've had them review the report. They are okay with the approach. They may see a way to bring more value, which we may try to value down more with Taylor Cores. And so that would be the expansive soils part. This is one tool in the toolbox, and then I like to be innovative. we can discuss warranty with contractors. It's just having a discussion with people and saying, hey, if I take these types of projects to a 5-year warranty, what's the impact on you, and what are you going to charge me, and how do we find a win-win? This is really about finding a win-win.
Right. Right.
So we can do that.
Also, regarding due diligence, we can have a guaranteed maximum price contract, but in fact, if it goes severely over what somebody has bid a project at, and they don't have the financial wherewithal to perform, we can still be left holding the bag. I mean, we can't force performance if somebody's bankrupt. So what kind of due diligence goes into a project like this to check their financial wherewithal?
We get a payment and performance bond on the cost of the
Okay.
project. So we have that bond, and I'll let Kendra, do you want to chime in on the reliability of those? I guess at this point.
I don't know if you want me to. We do get payments and performance bonds. They're becoming more difficult to collect, but it is some level of assurance that we have. But it does not mean there's money sitting in the bank account separately. So they can be more difficult to collect than if we collected something called a letter of credit where we just have cash sitting aside. But in today's financial situation, most companies can't post letters of credit. So the bonds are the happy medium.
Yeah, and it's actually even for, you bring up a good point, and that's another reason we kind of shortlisted and went with pre-qualified people is the low bids. It's a dangerous area with that type of situation. But even the good guys, we were just talking to ECI Taylor Course today. I'm looking at this original town job, and they're finding problems with their vendors. The vendors all want cash now before they'll deliver products. Well, if you're getting $100,000 worth of product and you, the owner, we're not going to pay for it till it's in the ground, they've got to find some cash flow to float that. And they're having trouble finding credit. So there's a lot of jockeying going out there trying to minimize everybody's risk. That payment and performance bond is probably our best way at this point.
At this point, yes.
Letter of credit, I'm not even sure you can get people to...
They can't post it these days.
Yeah,
We used to
yeah.
get them all the time, but nobody can get them anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Would you mind describing, I know what
Sorry.
a letter of credit is, but I'm not sure I know about the performance bond.
Basically, a payment and performance bond is a guarantee written by a bank saying that if we claim on the performance bond and we can show that the contractor's in default of the contract, so they haven't complied with what they were supposed to do, we can collect on that bond. The problem is that they're not always so quick to jump and pay us. So it's sort of like trying the legal case before we try the case to prove that they defaulted on their contract. So we would have to go back and prove to the bank who issued the bond that, yes, they've defaulted on their contract. So,
It's, as we talk, construction, we come in here, we make construction sound so clean and so easy. It's a very messy process. It's very sloppy. There's slop in everything. And, we try to have some of these safeguards that say, hey, we're safe. Your best safeguard is get a team that knows what they're doing and they're on your side to build the project the right way. If everybody's bought into what you want to do, they have incentive to be along with your side. You have a better success rate than spending a bunch of money getting all kinds of protections.
I agree wholeheartedly, Kurt. That's why I believe due diligence in terms of reputation and long-term track record of doing the job and doing it well. I don't mind paying up. I don't mind doing guaranteed maximum price where we assume some of the risk quotient there as long as we've got a long-term project that is done well, that stands the test of time.
Yep. That's the big picture goal here.
Trustee Hanson? Job well done. Appreciate your hard work. Can you go back to the slide that shows where you're actually going to reconstruct the portion of the road?
Yeah, do you want the overall or the side view?
The other one, that one. Right there.
Okay.
So is it just that one section that you're going to reconstruct? It's closer to El Dorado?
No, so we're doing two, let me go back to this side. So we're doing two spots. This is a big, this is like 1,000, 1,500 feet here.
Okay.
This whole thing's coming out, this whole road's going to close.
Oh, okay.
Because that's where it's really, if you were to stand at the bottom and look up, one side's really kind of jacked up and it's
Yeah.
really wavy. So
It's right at Bristol, that
Yeah.
left turn lane,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, most of it's right in.
By the
here.
tennis
It's
court.
a little more slight here. And then this area here is more like 100, 200 feet at my scale's probably bad there. But that area we're going to just try to do it with traffic control. We won't shut down there. We'll do the outside and then work our way in the middle and then bring the traffic out for recon. reconstruct. But yes, the red, the reconstruct,
Okay.
and reconstruct.
I would reiterate concerns about warranty, because it seems like that area by Bristol was fixed at one point, and it's done the same thing again.
Okay.
And if we've got a 2-year warranty, it seems like at the 2-year mark, it would probably go bad again.
Okay. That's where we have to be intimate with our geotechs.
Trustees Kumatz?
So what's the timing on this project? I mean, I'm really loath to move this forward without a longer warranty. So I need to know what's the issue on when you're planning to go to construction.
A week from now. No, I'm being dead serious.
Yeah.
We've ramped up we can talk.
One of the driving factors here was doing it while school's out.
Yeah, so it's either now
No, I
or
love the
next year.
process, but I can't live with 2 years.
Well, what, so 2
Excuse me,
years
but that's
is-
new information.
What's new information?
From me?
Because 2 years is
From
always
me or
what we
to
do.
me?
All of us. There's never been discussion about improved warranties on our standard contracts.
It's just that it's not that everybody here doesn't know this is a big problem street. And it's been a big problem street. It ends up straight, then it ends up goofed up again after a
We
couple
we
of
can go
years.
back and find out what the
What would
cost
the-
markup would be for
that's-
a 5-year or a 10-year warranty.
I think that's very useful information.
We could.
The project will not get wrapped up before school starts on August 17th.
Which means it won't be
That's
done
a
this
bigger
year.
problem, I think.
Yeah, I think how we could address this. So the 2-year warranty, it is an industry standard, and it is our town standard. It is pretty much most of the community standard. But if we, in this area, want to go to a 5 or a 10, I don't think that changes the level of quality that we want it to go in. We want it to go into a level of quality. We could establish a GMP number 2 and say we want to buy up to a 5-year warranty, and then we establish that.
And can it be project specific? This is a problem project. There are others where we're resurfacing and fine, we've never had any expansions and all that stuff. I have no problem with a 2-year warranty in a place like that. But in a place like this, I don't see how we can go with a 2-year warranty.
We can do that. Yeah, I think so. I didn't get innovative on the warranty. You bring up a good point. I just didn't go there because it's so industry standard. It really bucks pricing and what we're used to seeing.
When you
Justice
mentioned that the real issue would be with the geotechnical advisor on this, if there was a problem, what's their warranty?
It's legal at that point. I mean, they don't have a warranty. It's their report. This is what they recommended for a 10-year solution. And when they say 10-year, it's not because it should get wavy in 10 years. It's because the pavement might start to go in 10 years. But this was a 10, 15-year solution. And if you guys want some reassurance on this before we dive in, I can definitely get with the geotechs and get some more from them, discuss if this does go south, how they're going to handle this. We can get... I hear we need to develop a comfort level, and we can try to do that if we need to. I haven't been able to understand what was done there previously and how substantial it was. So has anyone seen, was the road ripped out and put back in?
No.
Resurface.
It was so.
Yeah, it was never reconstructed.
I think that's why I'm not. The resurfacing never corrected the initial. That was just a pure cosmetic
When you
thing.
see that.
With some fill, but I mean, not fill, not underneath fill,
Yeah.
but just, I think, more stuff
Yeah.
in certain parts.
It was a Band-Aid solution to a cancer.
And I think that's kind of what I would say.
What you're proposing is very, very different than
Yes.
what's happened before.
Yes.
Trustee Pennington?
But to follow up on what Trustee Sorelli asked, in terms of the geotech firm, if their recommendation doesn't work as executed, there's really no fallback on the geotech firm because they're the scientists, if you will, not the
At
executive.
most, don't we just get what we paid them, and that's not
Right,
going to
right.
cover the road reconstruction.
Well,
Well, we could sue them for negligence
litigate.
if we
Right.
determine that they're negligent. We don't have a warranty
Right.
with them because they're a
Right.
professional
Right.
services provider.
Just clarify that. But I think what this also points out is a sort of a longer-term issue. When we've got a project of this magnitude and this expense, I would expect to see it in front of us well in advance. of the date in which it would start, so that we can ask these questions, get answers to the questions, and then make a decision that isn't perhaps rushed because of time constraints.
Do you think, are you guys thinking maybe like a pre-design workshop for big projects? Is that?
Well, or just, we know, for example, this one, we've known over time it had to be done. So why couldn't it have been, why couldn't we have received this proposal 3 months ago rather than right now?
Because the information didn't exist. If we wanted to look at our 2011 work program or put our entire 2010 work program on hold, we can do that. But the rules are changing here. The discussion was to reconstruct, by definition, remove everything which exists on Indiana between Colton and El Dorado and rebuild it. We've come up with a more innovative and a more practical solution by addressing the scabs instead of the entire reconstruct, rebuild. We can go ahead and do the first one, but, I mean, to turn around and say, this should have been before us 6 months ago. The board made the decision that this was the highest priority road to do in 2010 when they approved the budget last September 1st. Kurt's been working on it since walking in the door almost, I think, August 15th of last year, and this is what he's come up with.
I see both sides, actually. I see what you're saying, Scott. If we delay it now, we're not going to get it done, and school is going to start, so that's a big problem. On the other hand, I don't know if we need to go back 3 months, like Trustee Pennington said, but we certainly could have had this in our last board meeting, given that we're not going to meet for another 3 or 4 weeks, maybe address some of the concerns that we have, like Trustee Skumas, especially about the warranty. You have time to talk to them, then you come back here today, and we make the final decision. Everybody is in agreement. So now I feel like we're kind of stuck. Do we vote yes and we move on with some cloudy assurances that the warranty may extend from 2 years to 5 years? You can't promise that, really, because you don't know.
Well, I think it's, if we were to reverse, if we were to start over, and we, I guess, have this conversation to kind of scope out the project, and we say, we want this road to be perfect for 10 years or 20 years. We could do that. And then I would go to the geotech and say, I want this road to be perfect for 10 years or 20 years. I think their recommendation may have been different. One thing I haven't said is I think the solution the geotechs try to present, and they're trying to do the best job for their clients. They're dealing with Mother Nature at its worst, but they're trying to balance risk versus cost.
I understand that.
And we could reconstruct. We could dig out 20 feet of the soils and put it in all non-expansive gravel subgrade, and that would you would have that guarantee, but it may cost 10 times as much than what we're doing today to do that. So, you know, I think we've got a balance between risk and cost here.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can, I think moving forward we can do those things. I think this job has the best balance right now with what we want. In the budget we have to spend this year. That would be the other thing I would say.
Trustee Skumas.
So your original estimate was it would cost between $1.1 and $1.2 million to redo, to take down to the gravel or whatever this entire road. And so you've got a cost savings of about 30%, and we're doing about half the road? Or a little less than half the road, is that right?
Well, the rest of the road we're still doing, we're going to mill along the edges like we did on the overlay program last year, and we will fix big cracks, replace concrete, and then the whole road will get a new final overlay. So reconstruct, yes, there's been that big a reduction, but there's still work going on in the whole road. It'll look like a new road, the entire thing.
Is that whole road defined up to Rock Creek or to El Dorado?
El Dorado to
El Dorado.
Yeah.
Actually, to the north side of the El Dorado, so we'll take care of the intersection. There's this area here's a little funky drainage-wise, so we'll improve that. We did bid the IGMP to try to get the north portion in, and it just everything was adding up to too much for the 1.8 budget that we have.
But you feel like it's a pretty good bargain, despite your full estimate of $1.2 million, to reconstruct the entire strip, to get it down to 845 to only reconstruct those pieces.
Yes, I think to reconstruct here or here, that you're not getting anything. if you go, in fact, I'll be more practical about it. If you drive these areas, there's no problem with the road. It looks fine.
No, that's true.
Any deterioration of pavement is strictly age.
I'm
So,
just asking you about the value.
Yeah.
And if we thought we were going to get the entire road for 1.2, and we're reconstructing only 40 or 50% of it, but we're paying 70% of what we thought we were going to pay, is that a good value?
I don't think
good
there'll be
deal?
total I kind of walked into some budgets here, so I'm working with what
Okay.
I walked into.
I didn't know where the 1.2
would've
came
gotten
from,
us-
so-
I don't think 1.1 would have gotten us the forward.
Thanks. Okay, that's what I needed to
Is
hear.
that what you?
I had just a couple of questions. The first was, there's fleet assistance, it looks like, in Mr. Payne's house.
Google Maps.
It's like, I don't know if the contractors are going to be in the driveway, but thank you for your...
Yeah, high country photography's over here.
But the more realistic one is that there's water that pools in broken down concrete, sort of at the, kind of where the end of the red stripe is there to the south.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there drainage correction that has to occur there, or is that?
Is that where we replaced some concrete not
Yes.
too long ago?
Yes.
Yeah, that's part of the whole, that's,
That will be addressed.
I'm pretty sure that's in the reconstruct.
It is.
Okay.
It will go to the, the inlets right there? That part?
Yes, it's right before the inlet.
It'll go to the inlets.
Okay.
So the inlets are kind of our control point on
Yeah.
the low side and the high side.
Okay, so my comments are, we can readdress how we want to do warranties. 2 years is, what we've always done. It seems like it's a real, it's a fine balance between cost and what we're going to get out of it. Once again, we could go back and do what you say, and we could get 5 and 10 year warranties. But I can tell you that they're going to be a whole big chunk of change more than what we're going to get. And is that really value for the town? I don't think so. I'm really feeling pretty comfortable with the geotechnical analysis. So I'd strongly recommend moving forward.
I would say.
Because if we don't do this, I would say that school buses won't be going down this street, and that means that we'll be doing this next year.
Yeah, I agree.
If I may, this has been an excellent job, and basically you've got the intellectual brain power now going activated. So in looking at the warranty issue, I don't know whether, I suspect it's not fruitful to go back to a group of contractors to say, oh, give me a 5 and a 10 on the project as defined, because of what you said earlier. If, in fact, on highly problematic streets in the future, we as a group desire the ability to look at a shorter-term contract versus a longer-term contract, a warranty, I mean, that needs to be known up front, because, in fact, the design of the project takes on a different character.
It does, and I was going to clarify that for you. I think we're intermixing design with warranty.
Correct.
If you want to guarantee longer-term performance, you're going to have a different design.
Right.
Warranty is strictly tied to the contractor and how they constructed the project.
Correct. So just to finish that thought, I think it's a waste of your time and perhaps ours to say, okay, current contract as defined, give me 5 or 10 years warranty, but instead perhaps to take what we've discussed and use it down the road and possibly investigate when bids come in on problematic streets to say, okay, here's standard warranty, give us what your design would be for X year warranty or X year warranty.
We can do that. I mean, we can do add alternates. I don't mind mixing and matching, so we can do that in the future.
This question may be more for Kendra than you, or maybe you don't. The warranty we're talking about, is this the statutory warranty, or is there?
No, we can extend it if we want to.
Okay, what is the statutory warranty?
There isn't one. We can put one in. We can define it as we want to in a contract.
There's no, for this kind of construction?
No.
It's only on home building? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the longer warranty, CDOT's the one that's kind of doing the longer warranties around it. It's kind of more like a pay per performance.
Well, they're not doing a good
And
job
you
with theirs.
Yeah. I mean, it's more like a performance contract like Southwest, but it's for your roads. It's like, hey, we want you to you're going to build this new road, and it needs to, and you're going to maintain it and take care of it for 10 years, and it has to meet this minimum standard. it's kind of a different way to go. But that's CDOT's doing some stuff like that.
I just think that job well done is a lot of research, and I move that we vote on this.
Yeah, we do.
Any public comment about this particular issue? We have 4 action items in front of us to go through, so I'll entertain a motion. Trustee Gregorus.
I make a motion to approve Town of Superior Resolution number R-29,
29? Yes.
Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving a contract with Taylor Coors LLC for reconstruction of Indiana Street from El Dorado Drive to Colton Road.
So motion by Trustee Gregorus, second by Trustee Skumatz. Discussion. Trustee Skumatz.
And this is not a reflection on your capabilities or on the good job that you did or on the thank you very much for the contract maximum type work that you did, because that was a major problem for me. I really hated that unit cost approach to our past contracts, but I don't want to live through another what we had over on Coal Creek. I need to see something with a longer warranty for something that's got as big a long-term problem as we've got.
Okay. Trustee Pennington.
Since this is a new approach by the town, could we also maybe ask Kurt to track the nature of this project on an ongoing basis and report back to us as to how it worked, what the problems were, what went well about it?
Yeah, I had kind of anticipated that.
Okay.
Great.
That would be great. Thank you. Further comments? Zealous?
Cirilli?
Yes.
Gregorus?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Skumatz?
No.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to the next one. Trustee Skumatz.
Like to make a motion?
Yep.
Town of Superior Resolution R-30,
Yes.
Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with Project 1 Integrated Services for construction and administration of the reconstruction of Indiana Street from El Dorado Drive to Colton Road.
Motion by Trustee Skumatz. Is there a second? Trustee Gregorus. Discussion. Phyllis.
Hanson?
Yes.
Gregorus?
Yes.
Cirilli?
Yes.
Skumatz?
No.
Pennington?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes. Okay, that motion carries. Entertain a motion. Trustee Gregorus.
I make a motion to approve Town of Superior Resolution R-31, Series 2010. Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with Rick Davis Consulting, LLC for construction, observation of reconstruction of Indiana Street from El Dorado Drive to Colton Road.
Motion by Trustee Gregorus. Is there a second? Trustee Skumatz. Discussion. Phyllis.
Skumatz?
No.
Pennington?
Yes.
Muckle?
Excuse me, yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Gregorus?
Yes.
Cirilli?
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Skumatz.
I'd like to make a motion, Town of Superior Resolution R-32,
Yes.
Series 2010, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with Ground Engineering Consultants Incorporated for materials testing of the reconstruction of Indiana Street from El Dorado Drive to Colton Road.
Motion by Trustee Skumatz. Is there a second? Trustee Gregorus. Discussion. Phyllis.
Gregorus?
Yes.
Cirilli?
Yes.
Hanson?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Skumatz?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Great job.
Yep. That brings us to item number 10, which is an executive session to hold a conference with the town's attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, paren 4, paren B, and to consider personnel matters pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, paren 4, paren F, regarding town manager evaluation. Entertain a motion to go into executive session. Trustee Skumatz, second. Trustee Hanson. Excuse me. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. We're in executive session.